The world was younger then, a place feverish with growth and drunk on the richness of its own atmosphere. We must cast our minds back, drifting through the corridors of deep time, past the rise of civilizations, past the retreat of the great glaciers, past the birth of our own species, until we arrive at a moment some 50 million years ago. This is the Eocene. The name itself whispers of the dawn of the new, but to the creatures living within it, it was an eternal, verdant present. Imagine the silence, not the emptiness of space, nor the sterile quiet of a modern room, but a living, breathing silence. It is a tapestry woven from the hum of a billion insects, the rustle of ferns taller than a man, and the dripping of water, always water, falling from the high canopy to the sponge of the forest floor. The earth was a greenhouse, the poles were free of ice, the seas were warm and high. A band of emerald forests stretched around the belly of the planet, a continuous cathedral of leaves where the sun only ever appeared as a fractured, dappled ghost on the moss below. In this humid, breathless world, the air hung heavy. It smelled of crushed pine needles, of decaying magnolia leaves, of wet bark and the musk of damp earth. It was an atmosphere so thick you could almost taste the chlorophyll. And here, in the dim green twilight of the understory, the drama of our origins began. It did not begin with a roar or a conqueror's stride. It began with a scurry. It began in the trembling heart of a creature no larger than a squirrel, a tiny, wide-eyed being clinging to the rough bark of a sequoia, navigating the shadows of giants. Let us descend from the canopy and focus our gaze on this distant ancestor. To the modern eye, they might resemble a lemur, or perhaps a tree shrew, but within their delicate frame held the blueprint of every human who would ever live. They were the architects of our bloodline, but they were not masters of their domain. They were refugees in a land of monsters. The ground shook with the footsteps of titanotheres, massive horned beasts that browsed the low branches. Above, the sky was patrolled by birds with wingspans that blotted out the light. In this ecosystem of colossal scales, our ancestors survived by being small, by being quiet, and by being hidden. They lived in the margins, in the crevices of the world. And their greatest asset, the singular biological marvel that allowed them to endure the indifference of the cosmos, was their coat. It is difficult for us, the naked apes of the future, to truly comprehend the significance of fur. We think of it as a texture, a material for clothing, or the soft flank of a pet. But in the Eocene, fur was not a luxury. It was the boundary between existence and oblivion. It was a dense, luxurious fortress that wrapped the body in a permanent embrace. Consider the physics of life. To be a mammal is to be a furnace. Deep within the chest, the heart beats, a rhythmic engine burning fuel to maintain a constant warm temperature. This is the inner fire, the metabolic miracle that allows for complex thought, for speed, for agility. But the universe is a thief. The laws of thermodynamics dictate that heat will always seek to escape, to flow from the warm body into the cool air, dissipating into the void. Without a barrier, the inner fire would flicker and die, and so nature, in her infinite slow wisdom, wove a blanket. Picture the coat of this Eocene ancestor. It was not a single layer, but a complex, dual-layered system of defense. Close to the skin lay the undercoat, fine, downy, chaotic crimps of hair that trapped air in a tangled web. This was the insulation, the thermal underwear of the Paleolithic. Above this rose the guard hairs, longer, coarser, often oiled by the skin's glands. These were the roof tiles, the shingled armor that shed the rain and blocked the wind. Together, these millions of follicles created a microclimate, a personal atmosphere. Regardless of the wind howling through the valley, regardless of the sudden rainstorm battering the leaves, the air directly touching the skin remained still and warm. This was the first technology, the first house our ancestors ever lived in. It was a house they carried on their backs. As the Eocene day began to fade, the importance of this coat shifted from protection to survival. The days were hot, steaming with the humidity of the greenhouse earth, but the nights were different. Even in a warm world, the absence of the sun brings a profound change. The heat radiates upward, escaping through the break in the clouds, and a chill settles over the forest floor. Imagine the transition. The chaotic noise of the day-shift creatures dies down. The buzzing of the giant dragonflies ceases. A new orchestra tunes up. The chirping of crickets, the rustle of nocturnal hunters. For our small ancestor, curled into the hollow of a rotting log or huddled in the crook of a branch, this was the moment of vulnerability. As the ambient temperature dropped, the cold began to probe the defenses of the body. It sought the heat of the blood. But the coat was ready. This is where the ghost begins to manifest. Deep in the dermis, at the root of every single hair, lay a microscopic muscle, the Arrector Pili, a tiny, smooth band of tissue, silent and involuntary. As the first chill of the evening air brushed against the nose of our ancestor, a signal was sent from the primitive brainstem. It was not a conscious thought. It was a command older than thought. Preserve the fire. In a synchronized wave, millions of these tiny muscles contracted. The effect was immediate. The fur, which had lain flat and sleek during the heat of the day, suddenly rose. It puffed up. The creature visibly expanded, becoming a ball of fluff. This was not for show. This was engineering. By lifting the hairs upright, the coat increased its thickness. It expanded the layer of trapped, dead air between the skin and the cold outside world. It was the same principle as fluffing a duvet. By increasing the loft, the thermal resistance doubled. The biting cold of the Eocene night was held at bay, unable to penetrate the wall of air. The inner warmth was reflected back onto the skin. There, in the darkness, our ancestors slept, wrapped in the cloud of their own biology, safe within the velvet silence. But the coat was more than just a blanket. It was a sensory organ. It was an extension of the nervous system, reaching out into the world. Close your eyes and imagine the sensation of being covered in such sensitivity. Every breeze that stirred the forest was felt not as a chill on the skin, but as a subtle movement of the hairs, a whisper of direction and speed. The coat acted as a wind vane, a humidity sensor, a radar dish. When the ancestor moved through the underbrush, the long guard hairs would brush against leaves and twigs, sending vibrations down the shaft to the nerve endings at the root. Before the skin ever touched a thorn, the hair knew it was there. This tactile awareness was crucial in a world of shadows. In the pitch black of the forest night, vision is limited, but the coat feels the proximity of obstacles. It feels the narrowing of a tunnel, the closeness of a predator. It was a force field of perception, expanding the boundaries of the self beyond the skin, out into the air itself. And there was a social language to the fur as well. In the quiet moments of the afternoon, when the danger of predators was low and the belly was full of fruit, our ancestors would engage in the ritual of grooming. This was the weaving of the social fabric. Fingers, nimble and delicate, the precursors to the hands that would one day build cathedrals and play pianos, combed through the thick pelts of kin. They picked out parasites, removed burrs, and smoothed the matted tangles. But the physical act was secondary to the chemical one. The rhythmic stroking of the fur released cascades of oxytocin and endorphins in the brain. It was a language of love and belonging spoken through the medium of hair. To be groomed was to be accepted. To be groomed was to be safe. The fur was the interface of affection, the boundary where I ended and we began. The sensation of another's fingers moving through that dense, warm coat must have been one of the most profound comforts of their existence. It was a reassurance that they were not alone in the vast, dangerous green. In a world of teeth and claws, the softness of the fur was a sanctuary. But let us return to the cold, for it is the cold that forged the legacy we carry today. Time is a river that never stops flowing. The Eocene, for all its lush permanence, began to wane. The continents drifted. Ocean currents shifted. The great greenhouse began to cool. The tropical forests broke apart, giving way to cooler, drier woodlands. The nights grew longer, and the bite of the frost became sharper. For our ancestors, the coat became even more vital. The Arrector Pili muscles worked harder. Every night was a test of the insulation. The ability to bristle, to loft the fur, became a primary survival trait. Those with weak muscles or sparse fur did not wake up when the sun rose. Their inner fire was extinguished by the cold. Those who survived were the ones who could fluff their coats the best, trapping every calorie of heat. Nature is a sculptor, and her chisel is death. She carved our lineage out of the cold, selecting for the best coats, the strongest piloerection reflexes. We are the children of the warm. We are the descendants of the ones who could shiver effectively, who could make their fur stand on end to defy the winter. Now, pause and look at your own arm. Look at the smooth, almost hairless skin. It seems so different from the thick pelt we have been describing. We have stripped off the coat. We have walked out of the forest and into the savannah and eventually into climate-controlled cities. We have traded the fur for sweat glands, for clothing, for fire. But evolution is a hoarder. It rarely throws anything away completely. It simply repurposes it or leaves it in the attic of the anatomy, covered in dust. The ghosts of the Eocene are still there, right under the surface of your skin. The Arrector Pili muscles, those tiny, loyal guardians, did not vanish when the hair did. They are still anchored to your microscopic vellus hairs. They are still waiting for the signal. When you step out of a warm shower into a cold room, or when a sudden draft hits you, what happens? The ancient brainstem, blind to the passage of 50 million years, screams the same command it shouted in the Eocene. Preserve the fire! Loft the coat! The muscles contract. They pull with all their might, trying to lift a heavy fur coat that is no longer there. The skin bunches up around the follicle, creating a little bump. The tiny hair stands up, pathetic and thin, trapping no air, offering no warmth. It is a failure of mechanics, but a triumph of memory. That goosebump is a fossilized behavior. It is a biological reenactment of a scene from deep time. Your body is trying to be a small, furry creature in a cooling forest. It is trying to deploy a shield that you laid down eons ago. In the silence of the night, when you feel that prickle of cold and see the bumps rise on your flesh, you are not just shivering. You are echoing the lives of those ancestors. You are feeling what they felt. The sensation is a bridge across the ages, connecting your modern conscious mind to the primal instinctual struggle of the small creature hiding in the shadows of giants. The velvet silence of the Eocene is gone, buried under layers of rock and ice. The titanothers have turned to dust. The great sequoias have fallen. But the mechanism of survival endures. It is etched into the very architecture of your skin, a silent witness to the time when we were covered in the comfort of fur, when the rising of the hair was the difference between life and death. As we move forward in this story, we will see how this trait, this reflex to the cold, began to twist and change. We will see how it became entangled with fear, with aggression, and eventually with the highest peaks of human emotion. But we must never forget where it started. In the green, dappled light of a lost world, as a tiny muscle pulling on a strand of hair, fighting to keep the flame of life burning in the dark. The wind began long before the memory of man, a restless, invisible river flowing over the face of the young earth. In the deep trenches of the prehistoric valleys, where the shadows stretched long and violet against the snow-dusted ground, the wind was not merely weather, it was a living presence. It possessed a voice, a hollow, mournful howl that tore through the canopy of the ancient conifers and rattled the bones of the mountains. To understand the ghost on your arm, that sudden rippling of the skin we call a goosebump, we must first submit ourselves to the authority of this ancient wind. We must close our eyes and drift back to a time when the world was vast, wild, and indifferent to the fragility of life. We must stand in the shoes, or rather the padded, callous paws, of our distant ancestors and feel the profound terror of a heat that is fleeing. For a creature without fire, without the stone walls of a hearth, without the woven fibers of clothing, the cold is a predator more patient, more relentless, and more successful than the wolf or the saber-tooth. The wolf hunts only when it is hungry. The cold hunts always. It waits for the sun to dip below the jagged horizon. It waits for the blood to slow in sleep. It seeks to steal the one precious thing a mammal possesses, the inner fire, the golden warmth of metabolism that separates the living from the stone. But life, in its obstinate brilliance, did not leave these creatures defenseless. Over millions of years of trial and error, through the silent lottery of reproduction and survival, the body crafted a defense. It built a fortress. It was not a fortress of stone or wood, but of keratin, a complex, shifting, breathing architecture of warmth that we simply call fur. To the modern eye, hair is often an afterthought, a cosmetic detail to be styled or removed. But let us look closer, with the eyes of a paleoanthropologist obsessed with the machinery of survival. Let us shrink down until we are standing on the surface of that ancient skin, amidst the forest of follicles. Here, we see that the coat was a mechanical marvel, a masterpiece of biological engineering that rivals any modern technology. The skin of our ancestor was not a static wrapper. It was a landscape. It was a terrain that could change its topography in response to the threats of the air. Deep within the dermis, rooted in the rich, blood-fed soil of the body, lay the bulb of the hair. This was the factory floor, where cells divided in a frenzy of creation, pushing upward, hardening and dying to form the shaft. But attached to each of these shafts was a microscopic muscle, the Arrector Pili. We must give this tiny strand of tissue the reverence it deserves. It is the unsung hero of the mammalian lineage. It is a bridge between the brain and the barrier. It is the lever that controls the drawbridge. Imagine a night in the Oligocene, The lush tropical forests of the earlier epochs have begun to recede, replaced by open woodlands and scrubbing plains where the wind can pick up speed. The sun sets in a blaze of indifferent orange, and the temperature plummets. The air grows sharp and crystalline. Our ancestor, a small, shrew-like primate, perhaps no bigger than a cat, feels the shift. The sensors in the skin, the thermoreceptors, detect the drop in energy. They scream a silent warning to the hypothalamus, the ancient thermostat buried deep in the brain. "The heat is leaving," they whisper. "The thief is at the door." And the brain responds. It does not send a complex thought. It does not formulate a plan. It sends a lightning bolt of chemical command down the spinal cord, racing along the sympathetic nervous system. It is a command of war. Deploy the shields. At that instant, on the surface of the skin, a miracle of physics occurs. The Arrector Pili muscles, millions of them acting in perfect unison, contract. They pull on the base of the hair follicle, dragging the shaft from a relaxed oblique angle to a rigid upright position. We call this bristling. We call it fluffing up. But biologically, it is the construction of a personal atmosphere. Consider the physics of heat loss. Heat moves. It is restless. It seeks to flow from a warm object to a cold one. When the wind blows across smooth skin or flat hair, it strips away the thin layer of air that the body has warmed. This is convection, the thief running away with the jewels. The wind carries the heat away, and the body must burn more fuel, more precious calories to replace it. But when the coat rises, everything changes. By standing the hairs on end, the body creates depth. It transforms a two-dimensional surface into a three-dimensional trap. The upright hairs create a forest of obstacles for the air. The wind, hitting this barrier, is broken. It cannot sweep along the skin. Instead, it is caught in the tangle of the undercoat, that soft, downy layer hidden beneath the longer guard hairs. The air inside this forest of fur becomes still. It stops moving. And here is the magic. Still air is one of the best insulators in the known universe. By trapping this dead air against the skin, the raised fur creates a halo of warmth. The heat radiating from the body does not vanish into the night. It is caught, held, and reflected back. The creature is no longer wearing a thin shirt. It is wearing a thick, puffed-down jacket. This lofting effect was the difference between waking up and freezing to death. It was a reflex born of absolute necessity, an automatic shivering of the follicles that said, "We shall not freeze tonight." Let us linger in this moment, the moment of the change. Imagine the sensation for that creature. One moment, the cold is a biting presence, nipping at the flanks, sending shivers through the core. Then, the reflex kicks in. The skin tightens, a sensation we still feel today as a crawling feeling. The fur rises, and suddenly, a wave of relief. The biting edge of the wind is blunted. A soft, warm envelope forms around the body. The heat of the heart is contained. In the silence of those frozen nights, under the glittering, merciless stars of the Pleistocene, the rising of the fur was a silent prayer for survival, answered not by gods, but by the rigorous laws of thermodynamics. But this system was not without its costs. Evolution is never free. It is a game of trade-offs. To maintain such a coat required energy. It required protein to build the keratin. It required time to groom, to keep the hairs aligned and free of parasites so they could loft effectively. A matted coat is a cold coat. A dirty coat is a leak in the fortress. So the life of our ancestor was a life dedicated to the care of this machinery. We can picture them in the golden light of the morning, sitting on a sun-warmed rock. The terror of the cold night has passed. Now the fingers, nimble, sensitive, exploring, work through the fur of a mate. They pick, they smooth, they align. This was not just hygiene, it was the maintenance of the life support system. It was the checking of the seals, and it was connection. The warmth of the coat was not just physical, it was social. Because we were small and the night was large, the coat allowed for another strategy, the huddle. When the individual's architecture of warmth was not enough, they borrowed the warmth of another. They pressed their bodies together. The raised fur of one interlocked with the raised fur of another, creating a superorganism of insulation. Imagine the smell of that huddle, the scent of wood smoke from a distant natural wildfire, the musk of the body, the smell of rain on dry grass, the tactile sensation of soft, warm fur against the cheek. In that pile of breathing, living bodies, the boundary between self and other blurred. The heat was a shared resource. The Arrector Pili muscles of the entire group worked in concert, a collective bristling against the dark. This is the heritage you carry. This is the memory etched into your genome. As the eons dragged on, the world changed. The great forests broke apart. The climate fluctuated wildly, swinging between the hothouse and the icebox. Through it all, the architecture of warmth remained the primary defense. It was tested by the blizzards of the glacial maximums. It was tested by the damp chills of the interglacials. The creatures that could not fluff their coats effectively died. Their lines ended in the frost. We are the children of the best fluffers. We are the descendants of the ones whose Arrector Pili muscles were strong, responsive, and quick. But then, a strange turn of events began in our specific lineage. A choice was made, or rather a direction was taken, that would render this magnificent machinery obsolete, yet leave it intact. We began to sweat. We began to run. We moved out of the shade and into the relentless sun of the Savannah. To survive the heat of the hunt, we needed to dump heat, not trap it. And so, the great shedding began. The thick, luxurious fortress of fur thinned out. The guard hairs shortened. The undercoat vanished. We became the naked ape. But nature is a sentimental architect. She rarely tears down the old building completely. She just builds the new one on top of the ruins. The fur was gone, but the foundation remained. The follicles were still there. And crucially, the Arrector Pili muscles stayed at their posts. They are there right now, on your arm, as you listen to this. They are microscopic sentinels, standing guard over a fortress that has long since crumbled. They are connected to hairs so fine they are almost invisible, hairs that can no longer trap air, that can no longer create a halo of warmth. Yet, the wiring remains. The connection between the cold air, the brain, and the muscle is unbroken. When you step outside on a chilly October evening, or when the air conditioning in a room is too strong, your body does not know that you are a modern human wearing a cotton shirt. It does not know that you have central heating. It only knows what it knew 5 million years ago. It feels the heat leaving. It panics. "Raise the shields," the ancient brain commands, and the muscles contract. They pull with all the desperation of the Ice Age. They tug on the skin, creating those little bumps. The tiny vellus hairs stand up, straight and proud, trying to catch the wind, trying to hold the warm air. But it is a tragic pantomime. There is no fur to fluff. The air rushes past the thin hairs, mocking the effort. The skin ripples with the effort of a defense that no longer works. We call it goose flesh or goosebumps, but it is really a vestige of a lost power. It is a phantom motion. There is a profound beauty in this uselessness. It serves as a physical reminder of where we came from. It is a scar of evolution, a text written on the body that tells the story of the cold. Think of the ghost on the arm not as a flaw, but as a memory. Every time you shiver, every time you see that texture rise on your skin, you are reenacting the nights of the Paleolithic. You are feeling the shadow of the glacier. You are participating in a ritual that saved your ancestors from extinction. The architecture of warmth has been dismantled, but the blueprint is still there. The skin is still a dynamic, shifting landscape, breathing with the rhythm of a weather that we have largely conquered. And it is not just the cold that triggers this. As we shall see, the wiring of this system is tangled with other ancient imperatives. The same muscles that once raised the coat to trap heat also raised it to signal size, to bluff away predators, to speak the language of fear and aggression. But here, in the cold, we find its most primal purpose. Imagine the silence of the winter tundra again. The snow is falling, dry and hard like sand. A lone figure walks, not fully human yet, but no longer a tree dweller. They are wrapped in furs, but they are furs stripped from other animals. Their own skin is largely bare. The wind bites. Beneath the borrowed mammoth hide, the human skin reacts. The Arrector Pili contract. The ghost coat tries to rise beneath the leather coat. It is a layering of technologies, the biological one, failing but trying, and the intellectual one, the tool use that replaced it. In that friction between the goosebump and the garment, we see the story of humanity. We see the moment we stepped out of nature's automatic protection and began to build our own. We ceased to adapt our bodies to the world and began to adapt the world to our bodies. We mastered the fire. We mastered the weave. We mastered the shelter. We made the external world warm so that our internal world did not have to work so hard. We outsourced the job of the Arrector Pili to the loom and the hearth. Yet, the muscle waits. It waits in the dark of the dermis, eternal and vigilant. It does not know that the war against the cold has changed. It only knows its duty. So tonight, if you feel a chill, look at your arm. Watch the landscape change. Watch the bumps rise like tiny mountains on a plain, and whisper a word of thanks to the architecture of warmth. Acknowledge the silent prayer of the follicle. For without that reflex, without that mechanical marvel that once turned a thin coat into a fortress, the flame of your life might have been extinguished long before it was ever lit. The wind still howls in the deep valleys of the world. The cold is still patient, but we have changed. We have shed the coat, but we have kept the memory. And in the quiet geography of our own skin, the past is never truly dead. It is merely waiting for the temperature to drop. The landscape of the past is not merely measured in the drift of continents or the grinding retreat of glaciers. It is also measured in the microscopic topography of the body itself. If we were to shrink ourselves down, to become travelers smaller than a dust mote, and descend onto the surface of an ancient human ancestor, we would find ourselves standing on a rugged terrain. It is a world of valleys and ridges, a landscape populated by a dense forest of keratin spires, the hairs, that rise like redwoods from the soil of the skin. And if we were to dig deeper, to tunnel beneath that surface into the warm, dark earth of the dermis, we would discover the engine room of survival. Here, in the subterranean red gloom of the living tissue, lies a structure so small it defies the naked eye, yet so significant it helped carry our lineage through the crushing winters of the Pleistocene. It is the Arrector Pili. Let us pause to honor this microscopic hero. It is a tiny band of smooth muscle, no larger than a grain of silica sand found on a prehistoric beach. To the anatomist, it is a simple strap of tissue, connecting the hair follicle to the connective tissue of the upper dermis. But to the storyteller of evolution, it is a monument. It is the anchor. It is the tiny hand that grabs the rope of the hair and pulls. Deep in the silence of the body, where the conscious mind never visits, these muscles wait. They are the silent sentinels of the skin. Unlike the skeletal muscles of the arm or leg, the biceps and quadriceps that we command with our will to lift stones or run across the savannah, the Arrector Pili are beyond our control. They belong to the autonomic nervous system, the ancient automatic pilot of the body that manages the beat of the heart and the rhythm of the breath. They are the loyal servants of the old brain, the primitive core that concerns itself only with the brutal basics of staying alive. Imagine the sheer number of them. For every hair on the body, and even in our naked state we possess millions, there is a corresponding muscle, a dedicated servant for every single shaft. They form a vast, invisible army, stationed at regular intervals across the landscape of the skin, waiting for the trumpet call. They are the pulleys and levers of our thermal survival, a biological machinery designed to manipulate the boundary between the self and the world. To understand their labor, we must witness the moment of their activation. Picture a night in the late Pliocene, some 3 million years ago. The setting is the high volcanic plateaus of the Rift Valley. The sun has long since vanished behind the jagged silhouette of the mountains, taking its warmth with it. The air is thin here, and as the darkness settles, the temperature plummets. A biting wind sweeps across the scrubland, rattling the dry acacia pods and whistling through the rocks. Our ancestor, a hominid not yet fully human, crouches in the lee of a boulder. They have no fire. They have no woven blankets. They have only the body they were born with. As the ambient heat drains away into the pitiless sky, the body's internal sensors, the thermal receptors in the skin, detect the danger. The blood begins to cool. The inner fire is threatened. Immediately, a distress signal is sent. It is a whisper of electricity, a spark of biolightning traveling from the skin to the spinal cord, racing up to the hypothalamus, and then bouncing back down through the sympathetic nerve fibers. It is a command that moves faster than thought, faster than the blink of an eye. Contract. And in the darkness of the dermis, the army responds. It is a synchronized dance of millions. Simultaneously, across the chest, the arms, the legs, and the back, the Arrector Pili muscles shorten. They pull tight. It is a physical exertion, a spending of chemical energy, the coin of the realm in the body's economy, to perform a mechanical task. The geometry of this movement is elegant. In a relaxed state, the hair exits the skin at an angle, laying somewhat flat, like grass blown down by a steady breeze. This is the streamlined state. But the Arrector Pili is attached to the follicle at an angle. When it contracts, it acts as a lever. It pulls the base of the hair, forcing the shaft to pivot. The hair stands up. It snaps from a lazy 45 degrees to a rigid 90 degrees, standing perpendicular to the surface of the skin. This is the engine of the goosebump. When the muscle contracts, it drags the skin down with it at the point of attachment, creating a small depression. Simultaneously, the follicle itself is pushed upward. The result is that characteristic texture we know so well, the goose flesh, the bumpy terrain that resembles a plucked bird. But in the ancient world, This texture was hidden. It was the secret machinery working beneath the visible surface. What was visible, or rather, what was felt, was the rising of the coat. Imagine the sensation for that ancestor huddled against the rock. As the muscles fired, the millions of hairs on their body stood to attention. The thin, flat coat transformed into a thick, fluffy shield. The personal atmosphere we spoke of in the previous chapter was constructed in an instant. The wind, which had been cutting through to the skin, was suddenly held at bay. The warmth of the body was trapped. This was the work of the Arrector Pili. They were the laborers building a wall of air against the winter. But let us deepen our appreciation for this tiny muscle that could. Let us consider the cost of its vigilance. Muscle contraction consumes energy. It burns glucose. In a time of scarcity, when every calorie was a hard-won treasure gathered from roots and scavenged meat, the body would not spend this energy lightly. The fact that we have this reflex, that we have kept it for 50 million years, speaks to its immense value. The cost of fueling these millions of tiny muscles was far less than the cost of freezing to death. These muscles were the diligent workers of the body, laboring without thought or hesitation. They did not ask for rest. They did not wait for permission. As long as the cold persisted, they held the line. They remained contracted, keeping the hairs standing, keeping the fortress walls high. We can imagine the physical sensation of this enduring contraction. Today, we feel it as a tightness, a crawling tension across the shoulders and arms. But for our ancestors, this tension was the feeling of safety. It was the feeling of the body locking down, securing its perimeter. It was a somatic assurance that the defenses were active. There is a profound vulnerability in this system as well. The Arrector Pili are sensitive. They are wired directly into the fight-or-flight system. This means they are not just thermometers, they are emotional barometers. They react to the cold of fear just as readily as the cold of winter. Picture that same ancestor, not freezing, but startled. A twig snaps in the darkness. The smell of a leopard drifts on the breeze. The brain perceives a threat. The same electrical highway is activated. The adrenaline floods the system, and the Arrector Pili snap to attention. The fur stands up. The silhouette of the creature expands. This is the piloerection response, a desperate bluff to look larger, to look more formidable. Here, the tiny muscles are not builders of warmth, but soldiers of war. They are trying to intimidate the abyss. They are trying to say, I am big, I am dangerous, do not touch me. In this dual role, thermal regulator and emotional signaler, the Arrector Pili became central to the mammalian experience. They were the physical manifestation of the instinct to survive. They bridged the gap between the internal state of the creature and the external reality of the world. But let us return to the cold, for that is where the story of the goosebump is most poignant for us today. Generations faded into dust. The wheel of time turned, grinding down mountains and raising up new coastlines. The great ice sheets of the Pleistocene advanced and retreated in a slow, rhythmic breath. And through it all, the tiny muscles held on. As our species began to change, as we began to shed the heavy pelts of our primate cousins, a tragedy of biology began to unfold. We started to lose the forest of hair. The thick, insulating guard hairs became finer. The dense undercoat disappeared. We became the naked skinwalkers, reliant on fire and hides. Yet, nature is a conservative architect. She does not easily tear out the plumbing of the old house when she renovates. The hair follicles remained, though they produced only wispy, vellus hairs, translucent ghosts of the old coat. and the Arrector Pili muscles remained attached to them. This is the great irony of your body. You possess the complete functioning machinery for a fur coat that you no longer own. Think of the Arrector Pili today. They are like loyal soldiers stationed at a fort that has been abandoned by the main army. They polish their rifles. They stand their watch. When the signal comes, when the cold wind blows, they execute their orders with perfect discipline. They contract. They pull the lever. But nothing happens. The tiny invisible hair stands up, but it traps no air. It offers no insulation. The goosebump on your arm is a monument to futility. It is a gesture of survival that no longer survives. It is the body trying to pull a blanket over itself, only to find that the blanket is gone. There is a melancholy beauty in this. It means that every time you get goosebumps, you are witnessing a glitch in the deep code of life. You are seeing the persistence of the past. Your body refuses to accept that it is naked. In the deep logic of your physiology, you are still a furry creature of the Eocene, fully expecting a thick mane to rise and protect you from the elements. And yet, perhaps we should not view them as useless. Perhaps we should view them as ancient memories carved in bone, or in this case, carved in flesh. Let us imagine a modern moment to contrast with the ancient one. You are standing on a train platform in winter. You have forgotten your coat. The wind picks up. You feel that familiar prickle, that wave of tightening skin washing over your arms and legs. In that moment, you are united with the ancestor in the Rift Valley. You are united with the tree dweller in the Eocene forest. You are experiencing the exact same physiological event, triggered by the exact same machinery, driven by the exact same need to protect the inner fire. The Arrector Pili are the silent guardians of homeostasis, standing at attention whenever the world turns cold. They do not know that their efforts are now symbolic. They labor on. They pull tight to keep the inner fire burning, even if the fire is now protected by wool and polyester rather than keratin. We must also consider the resilience of this tissue. These muscles are smooth muscles, meaning they do not tire in the same way our skeletal muscles do. They can hold a contraction for a long time. They are built for endurance. This speaks to the nature of the threat they evolved to combat. The cold is not a sprinter. It is a marathon runner. It persists for the entire night, for the entire season. The defense had to be equally persistent. So, beneath the surface of your skin, a marathon is being run. A siege is being withstood. The muscles are locking down the hatches. It is also worth noting the specific arrangement of these muscles. They are not scattered randomly. They are aligned with the grain of the skin, following the lines of tension, the lines of Blaschko that trace the embryonic development of the fetus. This alignment ensures that when they contract, they do not just lift the hair, they tighten the skin itself. This tightening may have had a secondary benefit for our ancestors, reducing the surface area slightly, making the skin more compact, less permeable to the wind. It was a battening down of the hatches. Today, we feel this as the skin becoming firmer, more rigid. It is the armor of the body hardening against the assault of the temperature. In the silence of the genome, the instructions for building these muscles have been passed down, copying over and over again, with scarcely a mistake. Build the anchor, build the lever, connect the wire. It is a testament to how crucial this system was. Nature does not preserve complex machinery for 50 million years unless it was essential. We are walking museums. We are living archives. And the Arrector Pili is one of our most precious exhibits. It is a tiny grain of sand-sized window into the time when we were not masters of the planet. but small shivering things trying to make it to the dawn. As we drift deeper into this story, we will see how this mechanism, this simple thermal switch, got hijacked. We will see how the wires crossed with the soul. We will see how the shiver of cold became the shiver of beauty, the shiver of music, the shiver of God. But for now, let us simply rest in the knowledge of the machinery. Let us appreciate the tiny muscle that could. It is a silent worker in the vast factory of your being. It asks for no praise. It requires no conscious thought. It simply waits in the dark, tethered to a ghost, ready to pull the string the moment the world turns cold. And in that steadfast loyalty, in that biological stubbornness, we find a reflection of the very spirit that allowed us to survive. We held on. We endured. We kept the fire burning. And the Arrector Pili helped us do it, one microscopic contraction at a time. The silence of the prehistoric night was never truly silent. If we could transport ourselves back to the dense, tangled woodlands of the Eocene, or the swaying, moonlit oceans of grass that formed the cradle of humanity in the Pliocene, we would find that the darkness possessed a texture. It was a heavy, suffocating velvet, woven with the sounds of a world that viewed our ancestors not as masters, but as meat. We have spoken of the cold, that patient, abiotic thief that sought to steal the warmth from the blood. But the cold was impersonal. It had no eyes. It had no intent. In the wild theater of the past, there was a second, more terrifying threat that lurked in the spaces between the trees. There were eyes in the darkness, amber orbs reflecting the starlight with a predatory hunger. There were teeth that gleamed with the wet promise of violence. There was the sudden, heart-stopping snap of a dry twig that signaled not the wind, but a footfall. In these moments of absolute terror, the architecture of the body had to shift instantly from a mode of conservation to a mode of defense. The Arrector Pili, those millions of microscopic muscles we have come to know as the guardians of warmth, were called upon to serve a second, equally vital purpose. They became the architects of illusion. They became the creators of a desperate biological lie. To understand this transformation, we must descend into the chemistry of fear. Imagine the ancestor, a small bipedal hominid, perhaps Australopithecus afarensis, standing alone near a waterhole at dusk. The wind has died down. The air is still. Suddenly, the tall grass parts. The scent of a predator, the musky, acrid odor of a Dinophalus or a hunting hyena, drifts on the air. The brain, that ancient sentinel, perceives the threat before the conscious mind can even name it. The amygdala, the almond-shaped alarm bell buried deep within the temporal lobes, rings out. It bypasses logic. It bypasses reason. It sends a cascading signal down into the adrenal glands, perched like tri-cornered hats atop the kidneys. And then the floodgates open. Adrenaline, the ancient chemical of action, the liquid lightning of the body, surges into the bloodstream. It is a potion brewed by evolution for the singular purpose of surviving the next 60 seconds. It dilates the pupils to let in the moonlight. It accelerates the heart to pump oxygen to the thighs. But crucially for our story, it screams a command to the skin. Bristle. The Arrector Pili muscles, which only moments ago might have been relaxed or gently contracted for warmth, now spasm with violent intensity. Every single hair on the body, and remember our ancestor was covered in a thick, dense pelt, snaps to a rigid, upright position. This was not the gentle lofting used to trap air against the cold. This was an explosive expansion. In the blink of an eye, the silhouette of the creature changed. The fur stood out straight from the skin, stiff and vibrating with tension. Consider the visual impact of this transformation. In the dim light of the Paleolithic dusk, size is the primary currency of intimidation. Predators are calculators. They are constant assessors of risk versus reward. A lion does not wish to fight a battle it might lose. It wishes to kill a victim that cannot fight back. An injury to a predator is a death sentence, a slow decline into starvation. Therefore, they look for weakness. They look for the small, the sick, the shrinking. But when the adrenaline hit, our ancestor suddenly appeared to double in volume. The smooth, contoured outline of the primate body was replaced by a jagged, bristling halo. The shoulders looked broader, the neck looked thicker, the chest appeared deeper. To the eyes of the predator, the prey had suddenly grown. It was a bluff, a magnificent visual lie told by the biology of the frightened. It said, "I am bigger than I seem. I am dangerous to eat. If you strike me, you will bite into a whirlwind." This phenomenon, known to science as piloerection, was a shield of vanity. It was a desperate attempt to intimidate the abyss. In the tense, silent standoff between the eater and the eaten, the ability to bristle was often the razor-thin margin between death and seeing another sunrise. The skin was no longer just a wrapper. It was a weapon of psychological warfare. We see echoes of this ancient mechanism in the animal kingdom today, unchanged by the eons. Picture a house cat confronted by a dog. It turns sideways to maximize its profile. It arches its back, and its fur stands on end, turning a 5-pound pet into a hissing, spitting demon of fluff. Picture the chimpanzee, our closest living cousin. When two males vie for dominance, they do not immediately resort to violence. They bristle. Their hair stands up, making them look like hulking giants. They sway and charge, using the illusion of mass to settle the dispute without bloodshed. Our ancestors played this same game. Deep in the grasslands of the Pliocene, they stood their ground, their coats puffed out in a halo of defiance. It is a haunting image, a small, fragile creature, armed with no claws, no fangs, and no weapons, using the very hair on its body to shout a lie into the face of a monster. Let us step into the skin of that ancestor for a moment. Feel the sensation of the fear fluff. It is distinct from the shiver of cold. The cold contraction is a slow, creeping tightness. The fear contraction is a shock wave. It travels from the back of the neck, sweeping down the spine and radiating out to the limbs. It feels as though the skin itself is trying to jump off the body. It is an electrifying prickle, a sensation of being electrically charged. This is the heebie-jeebies. This is the feeling of your hair standing on end. It is the somatic signature of terror. But the illusion was not just for the predator, it was also a signal to the tribe. We were social creatures, living in bands, bound by kinship and mutual survival. In the tall grass, vision was often obscured. A silent signal was needed. When one member of the troop spotted a threat and bristled, the change in their silhouette was an immediate visual alarm to the others. "Look at me," the body cried. "I am big because I am afraid." The sight of a bristling kin triggered a mirror response in the others. The fear was contagious, passed not through words, but through the visual language of the coat. Suddenly, the predator was not facing one larger-than-life victim, but a wall of them. A phalanx of bristling, puffed-up primates, screaming and shaking branches, looking like a single massive organism. The illusion of giants became a collective hallucination, a group bluff that could drive away even the boldest leopard. However, We must also acknowledge the tragic vulnerability inherent in this system. The Arrector Pili are honest mechanisms. They react to the brain's command without judgment. But the success of the bluff relies on the gullibility of the observer. There were nights when the lie failed. There were predators too hungry, too desperate, or too experienced to be fooled by a puff of hair. The saber-toothed cat, with its knife-like canines, might see through the volume. The pack of hyenas might sense the trembling beneath the bristle. In those moments, the illusion collapsed. The hare, standing so proud and tall, offered no physical protection against the crushing bite. It was soft. It was yielding. The shield was made of air and hope. The tragedy of the fossil record is filled with these failures. We find the puncture marks on the skulls of our ancestors, the evidence of the nights when the visual lie was not enough. But enough of them survived, enough of the best bluffers, the most responsive bristlers, to pass the genes down to us. And now, we come to the great irony of our modern existence. The great shedding occurred. As we moved into the heat of the day and adopted the persistence hunt, the thick coat vanished. The dense forests of hair were clear-cut by evolution, leaving behind the open plains of our naked skin. But the mechanism of the bluff did not leave. The wiring of the amygdala, the pathway of the adrenaline, and the loyalty of the Arrector Pili remained exactly as they were in the time of the Dinophilus. The body kept the hardware for a strategy it could no longer execute. Think of the last time you were truly frightened. Perhaps you were walking down a dark alleyway, or you heard a noise in your basement when you thought you were alone. Maybe you were watching a horror film, and the camera panned slowly into the shadows. What happened to your body? Your heart raced, your pupils dilated, and then that familiar ghostly wave washed over you. The hair on the back of your neck stood up. The skin on your arms broke out in goose flesh. You felt a sudden, prickly largeness, a desire to stiffen and expand. Your body was trying to bluff the monster in the basement. Your biology was screaming at the killer on the movie screen, "Stay back! I am bigger than I look!" But you are naked. There is no fur to puff up. There is no silhouette to expand. To a modern observer, or even to a modern predator, you do not look bigger. You just look terrified. The goosebumps are the script of a play that has been canceled. They are the stage directions for a costume you no longer wear. There is something deeply touching about this vestigial reflex. It is a reminder that deep within the skyscrapers and the illuminated cities of the 21st century, we are still the prey animals of the Pleistocene. We still carry the anxiety of the food chain in our marrow. When you feel the hair on your arms rise in fear, you are not reacting to the specific threat in front of you. The bill you can't pay, the deadline at work, the spooky movie. You are reacting to the ancient archetype of the beast. You are reacting to the eyes in the darkness. The illusion of giants has become an internal experience rather than an external reality. We feel the urge to be big, but we remain small. And yet, there is another layer to this. The reflex has not only persisted, it has been repurposed. In the complex tapestry of human social evolution, the piloerection response began to tangle with other intense emotions. It wasn't just fear that triggered the adrenaline, it was aggression, rage, and the intense focus of the hunt. In the heat of battle, ancient human warriors would feel this surge. The battle rage, or the berserker state, is often described with the imagery of hair standing on end. The Celts washed their hair in lime to make it stand up, artificially recreating the lost mane of the primate, trying to reclaim the illusion of giants through culture what they had lost through biology. They understood instinctively that a bristling silhouette strikes fear into the heart of the enemy. Even in our language, we preserve this memory. We speak of a hair-raising adventure. We say someone bristled at an insult. We talk of a story that makes our flesh crawl. These idioms are not random metaphors. They are literal descriptions of our physiological heritage. They are linguistic fossils, preserving the truth of the Arrector Pili. But let us return to the dark primeval forest for one last look. The dawn is coming. The predator, confused perhaps by the sudden expansion of the prey, or simply unwilling to take the risk, turns away. It slips back into the shadows, leaving the small hominid trembling but alive. The adrenaline fades. The chemical tide recedes. The Arrector Pili muscles, exhausted from their violent contraction, begin to relax. The fur slowly flattens back against the skin. The illusion dissolves. The giant becomes small again. The creature takes a breath that will eventually lead to language, to fire, to us. They survived the night because they could lie with their skin. They survived because for a fleeting moment they borrowed the majesty of a monster to ward off a monster. As you lie in the safety of your bed tonight, protected by walls and locks, you may feel safe from the beasts of the past. But your skin remembers. It waits for the snap of the twig. It waits for the shadow to move. And if it does, the tiny muscles will be ready to make you a giant once more, even if only in the silent, bumpy braille of your own flesh. The skin is a weapon that has lost its ammunition, but it has never lost its aim. And as the sun rose over those ancient savannas, bringing with it the heat that would eventually strip us of our fur entirely, a new challenge awaited. The illusion of giants would give way to the reality of the naked. The loss of the coat was coming, and with it, a vulnerability that would force us to find new ways to survive, not by puffing ourselves up, but by cooling ourselves down. The wheel of the world turns with a slowness that defies the comprehension of the living. To the single life, the mountains are eternal and the rivers are fixed, but to the deep eye of time, the earth is as fluid as mercury. Eons drifted by like clouds across the face of an indifferent sun, and as they passed, the cradle of our beginning began to rock violently. We must cast our minds back to a time roughly 3 to 4 million years ago, to the great fracturing of the African continent. Deep beneath the crust, the tectonic plates groaned and pulled apart, ripping the earth open to form the Great Rift Valley. This was not merely a geological event, it was the opening of a new stage in the theater of life. As the mountains rose, they created a rain shadow, a colossal wall that blocked the moisture-laden winds from the ocean. The consequences were absolute. The lush, closed canopies of the ancestral forest, that eternal, verdant cathedral where we had spent millions of years in the dappled shade, began to falter. The rains failed. The great trees, unable to drink, withered and died, their skeletons bleaching in a new, harsher light. And in the spaces between them, a new world rushed in to fill the void. The grass. It was the birth of the Savannah, a vast golden ocean of swaying stems, stretching to a horizon that seemed to go on forever. It was a landscape of radical openness, a terrain of terrible beauty and ruthless exposure. And our ancestors, pushed by the tides of evolution, were forced to venture out from the retreating shadows. They were refugees of the canopy. They were creatures built for the vertical world of climbing. now cast down into the horizontal world of walking. As they stepped out of the receding tree line, they did something revolutionary. They stood up. They lifted their eyes from the ground and looked toward the shimmering distance. They became bipeds, balancing the heavy architecture of their bodies on 2 feet, freeing their hands to carry, to point, to hold. But this new world came with a price. The forest had been a place of stable temperatures, a climate-controlled womb where the sun was a fragmented ghost. The savannah was a furnace. Here, the sun was not a visitor, it was a dictator. It hung directly overhead, a searing white eye that poured radiation down upon the earth with a relentless, punishing intensity. The air shimmered with heat haze, distorting the shapes of distant herds. The ground baked until it was hard as pottery. There was nowhere to hide. For a creature evolved in the cool shade, this environment was hostile territory. And the greatest enemy was not the lion or the hyena, it was hyperthermia. It was the heat itself. To hunt, to forage, to travel across these vast distances in search of water and tubers, the body had to move. But movement generates heat. The inner fire of metabolism, combined with the external fire of the sun, created a deadly thermal load. And here lay the great paradox. The magnificent gift of the Eocene, the coat of dense, luxurious fur that had saved us from the ice, had become a prison. Picture the ancestor in this transitional moment. They are covered in the thick, dark hair of a primate. As they run after a small antelope or dig for roots in the hard earth, their body temperature spikes. The fur, designed to trap air and retain heat, does its job too well. It acts as a suffocating burden. It locks the heat against the skin. The creature begins to pant, the tongue lolling out, trying to exchange hot air for cool. But the air is not cool. The brain, that delicate organ sensitive to the slightest rise in temperature, begins to cook. They are forced to stop. They are forced to retreat to the shade of a lone acacia, exhausted, dizzy, defeated by their own insulation. The coat that was once a fortress has become a liability. It is a traitorous luxury. And so, deep in the silent, microscopic machinery of the genome, a decision was made. It was not a conscious choice, but a slow, brutal editing process conducted by the hand of natural selection. A great shedding began. It did not happen in a single generation, or even 100. It was a fading, a gradual erasure of the past. Over thousands of years, the dense tapestry of fur that covered the chest, the back, and the limbs began to thin. The genes that commanded the production of thick, coarse guard hairs were silenced or dialed down. The heavy pelt, which had bristled at the sight of leopards and puffed up against the frost, dissolved into the fine, almost invisible vellus hair we know today. Imagine the vulnerability of this transition. As the fur receded, the skin was revealed. For the first time in millions of years, the air touched the flesh directly. The wind was no longer filtered through a barrier. It was a direct caress. The rain was a direct impact. The sensory experience of being alive changed fundamentally. We became the naked apes, exposed to the elements, our skin bared to the wind and the stars. But nature rarely takes away without giving in return. The loss of the fur was not merely a shedding, it was a renovation. It was the installation of a new technology, one that would turn the human body into the greatest endurance runner the world had ever seen. As the hair follicles shrank, another structure in the skin began to proliferate, the eccrine sweat gland. Most mammals possess sweat glands, but they are few and usually located only on the pads of the paws or the nose. We, however, became a walking irrigation system. We developed millions of these tiny coiled tubes distributed across every square inch of our naked skin. This was the trade-off of immense proportions. We sacrificed the armor of warmth for the power of evaporation. Consider the physics of this new superpower. When the Savannah sun hammered down and the body began to heat up during the chase, the brain, the same brain that once commanded the fur to rise, now commanded the skin to weep. Water, drawn from the blood, was pushed out onto the surface of the body. There, it met the dry, hot air and evaporated. Evaporation is a thief of energy. As the water turned to vapor, it stole heat from the skin, cooling the blood that flowed beneath it. It was a liquid cooling system, elegant and efficient. It allowed us to dump heat at a rate that no other animal could match. Let us witness the power of this adaptation in a scene from the day in the life of Homo erectus. It is high noon. The sun is at its zenith, a blinding disk in a bleached sky. The temperature is hovering near 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The savanna is silent. The predators, the lions, the leopards, the cheetahs, are all asleep, panting in the deepest shade they can find. They are incapacitated by the heat. They cannot run without risking death. But the human is awake. A hunting party stands on a ridge, looking down at a herd of kudu. These men and women are not fast. They cannot outsprint a gazelle, but they are naked and they are wet. Their skin glistens with a sheen of perspiration, like a coat of living diamonds. They begin to run. It is a slow, rhythmic trot, a jog. The kudu scatters, sprinting away at 40 miles per hour. The humans do not sprint. They track. They follow the hoof prints in the dust. They keep moving. 10 minutes pass. 20. The kudu stops to rest in the shade, its sides heaving. It relies on panting to cool down, a clumsy mechanism that requires it to stop moving to breathe effectively. It cannot pant and run at the same time. But the humans appear on the horizon. The relentless two-legged joggers. The kudu must run again. The heat builds. The antelope's body temperature rises. It is wearing a fur coat in a sauna. It cannot shed the heat. Distress sets in. But the humans keep coming. Their skin is flushing with blood, bringing the heat to the surface where the sweat washes it away. They drink from ostrich eggshells filled with water, replenishing the coolant. They are engines that run on water and determination. An hour passes. 2 hours. The sun is merciless. The kudu is foaming at the mouth. Its legs tremble. It has hit the thermal wall. Its brain is boiling. Finally, it collapses in the grass, not from injury, but from heat exhaustion. The humans arrive. They are tired, yes, but they are not overheating. They have simply outlasted the animal. They have run it down using the weapon of their naked skin. This is the persistence hunt, the strategy that allowed a slow, clawless primate to eat the fastest meat on the plains. This was the victory of the naked skin. It was the moment we turned the hostile sun into an ally. We used the heat of the day as a weapon against the furry world. We became the masters of the noon hour, the only creature that could operate at peak efficiency when the world was burning. But let us not forget the duality of evolution. For every gift, there is a cost. The loss of the coat left us profoundly vulnerable in other ways. Without the physical barrier of fur, the skin was fragile. It tore easily on thorns. It was susceptible to the biting flies and the mosquitoes that carried the fevers of the swamp. And perhaps most dangerously, it was exposed to the ultraviolet radiation of the sun. The pale skin of our forest ancestors would have burned and blistered within hours on the open savanna. The UV rays would have destroyed the folate in the blood, a nutrient essential for reproduction and fetal development. We would have died out, a lineage of sunburned failures. And so, the skin had to change again. It had to paint itself. Deep in the epidermis, the melanocytes, the pigment factories, ramped up production. They churned out melanin, a dark, complex polymer that acts as a natural sunscreen. It formed a cap over the nucleus of every skin cell, absorbing the harmful radiation before it could shatter the DNA. Over generations, the skin of humanity darkened. It became the color of rich earth, of obsidian, of the night sky. This was not a cosmetic change. It was a medical shield. It was a chemical coat of armor replacing the physical coat of hair. The first modern humans, striding across the African plains, were dark-skinned masterpieces of adaptation, wrapped in a velvet that could endure the fire of the stars. But what of the cold? The shedding of the fur meant that when the sun went down, or when the rains came, or when we eventually migrated out of Africa into the northern latitudes, we were defenseless. The night was no longer something we could simply sleep through, curled in a ball. The night was a threat again. The loss of fur drove us to two of the most defining human inventions: fire and clothing. Because we were naked, we had to tame the flame. We had to bring the sun down to earth to warm us when the real sun vanished. Because we were naked, we had to steal the skins of other animals, the very coats we had biologically discarded, and drape them over our shoulders. We became the only animal that constructs its own removable skin. We became the fashioners of tools to compensate for the silence of our genes. And what of the ghost? What of the Arrector Pili muscles we discussed in the previous chapters? They did not leave. As the great shedding occurred, as the hair shafts miniaturized into near invisibility, the muscles remained faithful to their posts. They stayed anchored to the tiny vellus hairs. Imagine the confusion of the physiological system during this transition. The body still possessed the reflex to fluff up, but the material to fluff was vanishing. On a cold savanna night, the Arrector Pili would contract, trying to raise the ghost of the Eocene coat. The skin would ripple into goosebumps. The tiny hairs would stand up, but no air was trapped, no warmth was gained. The survival advantage of the reflex was gone, but the mechanism was too deeply embedded to be erased. It remained as a vestige, a physiological stutter. It became a symbol of our nakedness. Every time we shivered, we were reminded of what we had lost. But there is a poetic beauty in this new state of being. The naked skin brought us into a closer, more intimate contact with the world. Think of the sensory richness of the savanna for a naked human. The feeling of the tall grass brushing against the calves. The sensation of the wind drying the sweat on the back. The warmth of a child's skin against the mother's chest. Skin to skin without the barrier of fur. This intimacy likely drove the evolution of our social bonding. The grooming reflex, once a picking through thick fur for parasites, became a stroking of the skin. The caress became a primary language of love and comfort. The sensitivity of our naked skin made us more responsive to touch, more physically connected to one another. We became the sensual ape, the creature that experiences the world through a vast exposed canvas of nerve endings. And as the eons drifted on, this nakedness became our canvas in other ways. We began to decorate it. We used ochre and clay to paint patterns on the skin, signaling tribe and status. We used tattoos and scarification. The skin became a billboard for culture, a place to write our identity. But it all began there, in the burning furnace of the Pliocene and Pleistocene. It began with the retreat of the trees and the tyranny of the sun. It began with a desperate biological gamble, to strip away the protection of the past in order to run toward the future. So, the next time you are sweating on a hot day, do not wipe it away with annoyance. Pause and honor it. That moisture on your brow is the reason you are here. It is the ancient technology that allowed your ancestors to conquer the heat. It is the liquid echo of the great shedding. And the next time you look at your bare arm, realize that you are looking at a landscape of sacrifice. You are looking at the place where the fur used to be. You are looking at the armor that was traded for speed. You are looking at the ghost of the Savannah, written in the language of pores and pigment. We walked out of the forest as furry, scurrying creatures. We walked across the plains as tall, dark, sweating runners. We left the coat behind, but we carried the memory of it in the tiny muscles that still twitch when the wind blows cold. The world had changed, and we had changed with it. But the story was not over. The naked ape was now exposed, not just to the heat, but to the eyes of the world. And as the brain continued to grow, the mysteries of the skin would deepen, entangling themselves with the complexities of the mind. The wind has always possessed a voice. In the deep arboreal past, it spoke to our ancestors through the rustling of leaves and the creaking of high branches, a language of distance and height. But as the epochs ground forward, and the great forests of Africa retreated into memory, the wind found a new way to speak to us. It no longer spoke only to the ears. It began to speak directly to the flesh. We must imagine the magnitude of this transition, the sheer biological audacity of the great unveiling. It was not a sudden event, occurring on a single Tuesday in the Pleistocene, but a slow, gradual revelation, like a tide receding to expose a new and tender coastline. As the thick, protective pelts of our primate heritage thinned and vanished, the human skin, the largest organ of the body, the boundary between the self and the infinite, was laid bare. Picture an early hominid, perhaps a Homo ergaster, standing on the edge of the savannah at dawn. The air is cool, carrying the blue scent of morning mist and damp grass. For millions of years, their lineage had met this air with a shield of fur, a barrier that filtered the world, dampening the sting of the cold and the bite of the heat. But this creature is different. They stand naked under the vast, indifferent sky. The experience of being alive has been fundamentally rewritten. The air no longer rustles through a thicket of hair. It caresses the surface of the arms and legs directly. It is an intimacy that is both terrifying and electric. The skin has become a canvas, sensitive, soft, and acutely aware of every nuance of the environment. We became, in this era of shedding, creatures of touch. Consider the sensory revolution taking place within the nervous system. As the hair receded, the skin did not simply become empty. It became populated. The nerve endings, the Merkel cells, the Meissner's corpuscles, the Pacinian corpuscles, found themselves closer to the surface, unburdened by the heavy overcoat of the past. The resolution of our tactile world increased 1,000-fold. We could feel the humidity of the coming rain before the clouds even gathered, sensing the heaviness in the air as it pressed against the pores. We could feel the roughness of the acacia bark, not just as a texture, but as a map of the tree's life, reading the ridges and valleys with the fingertips. We could feel the gentle brush of the tall grass against the calves as we walked, a whisper of location and direction. The world was no longer just something we moved through. It was something we felt, constantly, a relentless stream of data flowing into the brain through the open gates of the skin. But there is a melancholy in this unveiling, a vulnerability that haunts us to this day. The fur had been armor. It had protected against the thorn, the insect, the tooth, and the claw. Without it, the skin was fragile. It tore easily. It bled. It burned under the ultraviolet gaze of the sun. We were soft creatures in a hard world, wrapped only in a parchment of living tissue. And yet nature is a tinkerer, not an engineer. This is the crucial truth of evolutionary biology, the secret that explains the ghost on your arm. An engineer, when designing a new machine, starts from scratch. If an airplane no longer needs a propeller, the engineer removes it. They do not leave a spinning blade attached to a jet engine simply because it was there before. But evolution does not work this way. Evolution cannot stop the machine to rebuild it. It must modify the ship while it is still sailing in the middle of the storm. It works with what is at hand, cobbling together solutions, repurposing old parts, and, most significantly, leaving behind the debris of the past if it is not immediately fatal to keep it. So, as the great shedding occurred, as the heavy wool vanished into the mists of genetic history, the infrastructure of the coat remained. The body did not scour the dermis clean. The hair follicles, those tiny factories of keratin, stayed rooted in the deep soil of the skin. They simply downsized. They switched from producing the thick, pigmented terminal hairs of a pelt to producing the whisper-thin, translucent vellus hairs that cover you now. And, inextricably bound to these follicles, the Arrector Pili muscles did not leave. We must pause to appreciate the poignant absurdity of this biological situation. Imagine a vast army stationed at a fortress. Their orders are clear. When the enemy approaches, when the cold wind blows, they must raise the drawbridge. They must lift the heavy iron gates to seal the castle. For eons they perform this duty perfectly. But then, slowly, the walls of the castle crumble. The iron gates rust away and vanish. The fortress becomes an open plain. Yet the soldiers remain. They are still at their posts. They still receive the orders. These microscopic muscles, these faithful servants of the autonomic nervous system, were left behind in the great unveiling. They remained attached to the tiny, wispy hairs that were left in the wake of the shedding. They were soldiers stationed at a post that had been effectively abandoned, waiting for orders that would no longer make sense in the physical world. The mechanism for fluffing up the coat was still perfect. The wiring from the brain to the muscle was intact. The chemical signal of adrenaline or the electrical signal of thermal stress could still travel the highway of the spine. But the coat itself, the heavy insulating payload that gave the muscle its purpose, was gone. We were left with the hardware of a furry creature operating in the body of a naked one. Let us visualize the first time this glitch manifested in our ancestors. Imagine a night in the deep Paleolithic. The fire has burned low, casting long, dancing shadows against the cave wall. The temperature drops as the winter wind finds its way into the shelter. The ancestor, huddled in a corner, feels the chill. The ancient brain, the lizard brain that remembers the Eocene, screams, "Deploy the insulation!" The Arrector Pili contract with a violent, disciplined snap. Millions of them, all over the chest, the arms, the legs. They pull on the hair follicles. They tug the skin. They expect resistance. They expect to lift the weight of a heavy pelt. But there is no weight. There is only the gossamer thread of a vellus hair. The hair stands up, pathetic and thin, invisible in the firelight. The skin, pulled by the muscle, bunches up into a little mountain, a goosebump. And nothing happens. No warm air is trapped. No insulation is created. The wind continues to bite the naked flesh. The ancestor shivers, wrapping their arms around themselves, using their hands to do what their skin can no longer accomplish. The machinery has fired. The energy has been spent. The reflex has been executed to perfection. But the result is a failure. It is a phantom limb sensation, but for the entire body. The skin is trying to remember a warmth it can no longer create. This persistence of the Arrector Pili is one of the most profound evidences of our history. If we had been created de novo, fully formed as modern humans, there would be no reason for these muscles to exist. They serve no thermal purpose for us. They are architectural remnants, like the bricked-up windows in an old building that hint at a floor plan that no longer exists. But let us look deeper into this day in the life of the unveiled skin. The persistence of these muscles also meant the persistence of the emotional display we discussed in previous chapters, the bluff. On the Savannah, the naked ape was vulnerable not just to cold, but to fear. When the hyena laughed in the dark, the adrenaline still surged, the muscles still snapped. The naked human bristled. But without the fur to puff up, the visual signal changed. We no longer looked bigger. Instead, the terror became etched onto the surface of the skin itself. The texture of the skin changed. A companion, looking at their friend in a moment of fear, would see the flesh go rough, like the skin of a plucked bird. The goosebump became a new kind of signal. It was no longer a signal to the predator. I am big, but a signal to the tribe. I am afraid. It became a sign of vulnerability rather than strength. It was a betrayal of the internal state. In losing our fur, we lost the ability to lie with our bodies. We could no longer fake our size. We could only reveal our terror. This vulnerability likely drove us closer together. If we could not puff up to face the dark alone, we had to face it together. The nakedness of our skin demanded the invention of culture, of weapons, of fire. It demanded that we find external solutions to the problems our biology could no longer solve, and consider the sensory landscape of the Arrector Pili contraction itself. For a furry animal, the contraction is likely felt as a warmth, a shifting of weight. For the naked human, it is a specific, unique sensation. It is a shiver that runs beneath the surface. It is the feeling of someone walking over your grave. This sensation, the tactile feeling of the vestigial reflex, became part of the human emotional palette. We began to associate that prickling, crawling feeling not just with cold, but with the uncanny, with the presence of the unknown. The ghost on the arm became a detector for the ghosts in the mind. As the millennia passed, and we moved into the caves of the Neanderthals and the shelters of the Cro-Magnons, the skin continued to be the frontier of our experience. We began to cover it. Yes, we learned to skin the bear and the wolf, taking their coats to replace the one we had lost. There is a deep irony in this. Picture a Neolithic hunter draped in a wolf pelt. Beneath the heavy stolen fur of the wolf, the hunter's own skin is naked. When the wind blows, the hunter's Arrector Pili contract, raising the tiny hairs on his human skin underneath the wolf skin. The biological coat tries to rise beneath the technological coat. The ancient reflex fires in the dark, muffled by the invention of clothing. We are layers of time stacked on top of one another, the lizard brain commanding the mammal muscle, covered by the tool use of the primate. But the great unveiling was not just about loss. It was about connection. The sensitive, naked skin allowed for a new kind of relationship with the elements. We learned to feel the wind as a navigator feels the current. We learned to feel the sun as a clock. The goosebump reflex, useless as it was for warmth, remained a faithful alert system. It told us when the temperature was dropping before we even consciously registered the cold. It told us when we were afraid before we knew why. It was a silent partner, a tremor in the hull of the ship. And what of the water? Our ancestors spent time near the rivers and the coasts. The naked skin is hydrodynamic. Fur drags in the water. Wet fur is heavy and dangerous. But naked skin glides. The goosebump reflex in water is particularly sharp. The shock of the cold plunge triggers the muscles instantly. Perhaps in some way the tightening of the skin helped to streamline the body further, a microscopic hardening of the surface against the fluid. Or perhaps it was just the same old song, played in a new key, the body trying to trap a layer of warm water against the skin, just as it once tried to trap a layer of warm air. As we stand in the modern world, looking at the smooth, hairless expanse of our forearms, we are looking at a landscape of survival. The scars, the freckles, the wrinkles, these are the maps of our individual lives. But the texture, the pore, the follicle, the hidden muscle, is the map of our species. The great unveiling was a gamble. We bet everything on our brains and our sweat glands. We traded the security of the coat for the versatility of the naked skin. And we won. We conquered every climate on Earth, not because we were born with the right insulation, but because we were born with the need to invent it. Yet, the ghost remains. The Arrector Pili waits. It does not know that we have won. It does not know that we have central heating and Gore-Tex. It thinks we are still in the forest. It thinks we are still vulnerable. And in a way, we are. The great unveiling made us the most sensitive creatures on the planet. We feel everything. We feel the physical world with a resolution that is agonizingly beautiful. And we feel the emotional world with the same intensity. As we transition to the next phase of our story, we will see how this physical sensitivity, this exposed wiring, became entangled with the deepest parts of our psyche. We will see how the reflex that failed to keep us warm began to set us on fire with emotion. We will see how the goosebump migrated from the skin to the soul. But for now, let the image of the naked ancestor stand in your mind. A small figure on a vast plain, shivering in the twilight, their skin rippling with a useless effort, standing brave and exposed before the coming night. A creature of touch, waiting for the future to begin. The great pendulum of the climate swung back, as it always does, returning the world to the grip of the ice. We must leave the scorching, sun-bleached savannas of the previous chapter and fast forward through the flickering film strip of the ages, arriving in the deep, blue-gray twilight of the Pleistocene. The world has grown old and cold. The glaciers, massive rivers of slow-moving ice, have descended from the poles, grinding the mountains into dust and carving the valleys into deep, U-shaped troughs. The air is no longer the humid breath of the jungle, nor the dry heat of the plains. It is sharp, crystalline, and devoid of moisture. It is an air that tastes of iron and snow. Here, in the shadow of the great ice sheets, the nights are long and unforgiving. The silence is absolute, broken only by the groaning of the glaciers and the sudden rifle-crack sound of a tree splitting in the frost. In this harsh theater, our ancestors, now fully human or nearly so, huddled for warmth. They were the survivors of the heat, now facing the test of the cold. They had migrated out of the cradle of Africa, following the herds, following the rivers, walking straight into the teeth of the Ice Age. Picture a small band of these wanderers seeking shelter in the mouth of a limestone cave. The fire they have built is small, a flickering defiance against the encroaching dark. The fuel is scarce, scrub brush, dried dung, the bones of large animals. They crowd around it, their shoulders touching, a knot of humanity trying to conserve the precious heat of the blood. But the fire only warms the front. The back is exposed to the draft that snakes along the cave floor, a current of freezing air that seeks out every gap in their clothing. And here, in this moment of vulnerability, the tragedy of the vestige reveals itself. The body of the human crouching by the fire is a biological archive, a library of adaptations accumulated over millions of years. But it is also a museum of obsolescence. As the cold draft hits the exposed skin of the neck and the arms, the ancient sentinels wake up. The thermoreceptors buried in the epidermis register the drop in temperature. They send a frantic distress signal to the hypothalamus, the primal command center deep in the brain. The brain does not know that the year is 20,000 BC. It does not know that the thick pelts of the Eocene were shed eons ago. It does not know that the creature it inhabits is wearing a cured deer hide. The brain operates on a set of instructions written in the deep time of the genetic code, instructions that have not been updated to reflect the current reality of the wardrobe. The command is issued with chemical urgency. The core is cooling. Deploy the insulation. Raise the coat. The electrical impulse races down the spinal cord, branching out into the peripheral nerves, finding its way to the millions of Arrector Pili muscles stationed all over the skin. These loyal, microscopic soldiers receive the order, and with the blind discipline of the reflex, they contract. They pull with all their might. They shorten, tugging on the follicles, pivoting the hair shafts, trying to erect a defensive barrier against the chill. But there is nothing to lift. This is the moment of the phantom. It is a biological pantomime, a gesture of absolute futility performed by the body in a desperate attempt to save itself. In the days of our furry ancestors, this action would have resulted in a glorious transformation. The heavy, dense wool would have puffed up, trapping a thick layer of still, warm air, a personal atmosphere that would have insulated the skin from the biting wind. The cold would have been stopped dead in its tracks, unable to penetrate the lofted fur. But for the naked ape by the fire, the result is pathetic. The muscles tug, but they are pulling on ropes attached to nothing but wisps. The tiny translucent vellus hairs, those fine, invisible filaments that cover our modern bodies, stand up obediently. They stand straight and tall, perpendicular to the skin. But they are too thin, too sparse, too weak to trap anything. The air flows right through them. The wind ignores them. Instead of a warm coat, the contraction merely distorts the skin. The muscle, anchored to the dermis, drags the tissue down as it shortens, while the follicle is pushed up. The result is the pebbled, bumpy texture we call goose flesh. It is a topographical map of failure. Each little bump is a monument to a defense system that has been dismantled. It is a visual record of a physiological error. Imagine the sensation for that ancestor. The creeping feeling of the skin tightening, the wave of chill that runs up the spine. It is the feeling of the body trying to do something impossible. It is the physical sensation of a memory. The body is expecting the warmth of the fur to envelop it. It is expecting the relief that comes with insulation. But the relief never comes. The cold continues to bite. The bumps rise, but the warmth does not follow. The mechanism is perfect. It is only the context that is broken. This is the definition of a vestige, a structure or behavior that has lost its original function but remains in the organism because evolution is a tinkerer, not an architect. Evolution does not strip the house down to the studs when it renovates. It simply builds the new room over the old one. It leaves the old wiring in the walls, even if it connects to nothing. The goosebump is a ghost in the machine. It is a flickering light switch that controls a bulb that shattered 3 million years ago. Let us deepen this sense of tragedy by considering the energy cost. Even in the freezing cold, when every calorie is precious, the body spends energy to contract these muscles. It burns glucose to fuel the Arrector Pili. It is spending its limited resources to deploy a shield that does not exist. It is a waste, a caloric leak, a desperate throwing of resources at a problem that cannot be solved by biology alone. And yet, the reflex persists. Why? Perhaps because the cost is not high enough to warrant removal. Evolution is ruthless, but it is also lazy. If a trait does not kill you, it is often allowed to stay, riding along as a passenger in the genome. The goosebump does not prevent us from reproducing. It does not weigh us down. And so it remains, a silent stowaway on the journey of our species. But let us look away from the ice for a moment and consider the other extreme. The vestige is not just a companion of the cold, it is a companion of the stark, terrifying shifts of the desert. Imagine a night in the Kalahari or the Namib thousands of years ago. The sun has set, and the heat of the day has evaporated into the clear, starry sky. The temperature drops 40 degrees in a matter of hours. The sand, which burned the feet at noon, is now cold enough to sap the life from a resting body. An early human hunter lies curled in a shallow depression in the earth, wrapped in a woven mat of grass. As the desert chill settles, the same ancient script plays out. The skin detects the drop. The brain commands the coat to rise. The bumps appear. Here, in the silence of the desert, the futility is perhaps even more poetic. The hunter is surrounded by vast emptiness. The stars above are cold, unblinking eyes. The body is a tiny island of heat in an ocean of entropy. The Arrector Pili strive to build a wall, to hold on to that heat, to keep the inner fire from radiating out into the cosmos. They pull and pull, night after night, generation after generation. It is a reflex reaching out for a ghost. This phrase captures the essence of the experience. The muscles are reaching for the ghost of the fur. They are reaching for a safety that is no longer there. They are grasping at the memory of a time when we were safe, when we were covered, when we were part of the wild world in a way we no longer are. There is a profound loneliness in the goosebump. It reminds us that we have left the animal kingdom behind, or rather, that we have stepped out of its warm embrace. We have shed the uniform of the mammal. We are the outcasts, the naked ones, the ones who must build fires and sew skins and construct walls because our own bodies can no longer do the job. The goosebump is the physical mark of our exile. Contrast this with the wolf or the bear. When the temperature drops, their system works in perfect harmony. The signal is sent, the muscles contract, the thick fur lofts, and they are warm. There is no glitch. There is no tragedy. There is only function. They are at home in the cold. We, with our bumpy, shivering skin, are strangers in it. But let us zoom in even closer, to the microscopic level of this failure. Let us watch the wind interact with the goosebump. When the wind hits a smooth surface, it flows fast, stripping away heat through convection. When it hits a thick coat of fur, it is trapped, becoming a stagnant, insulating layer. But what happens when it hits human goosebumps? The bumps create a rough, turbulent surface. In some ways, this might actually increase the surface area of the skin slightly, potentially allowing more heat to escape. It is a cruel irony. The attempt to save heat might, in our naked state, actually accelerate its loss. The tiny vellus hairs, standing up, might catch the wind just enough to create microturbulence, stripping the boundary layer of warm air away from the skin even faster. The body is fighting a war with weapons that have become liabilities. And yet, we must also see the beauty in this. The vestige is a connection. It is a bridge across time. When you look at your arm and see those bumps, you are not just looking at a physiological reaction. You are looking at deep history. You are seeing the visible evidence of your lineage. You are seeing the shadow of the Australopithecus who slept in the trees. You are seeing the ghost of the Homo erectus who ran the antelope down in the heat. You are seeing the legacy of the Ice Age survivors who shivered their way through the glacial maximums. The glitch is a storyteller. It tells us that we come from a long line of survivors. It tells us that our ancestors were once furry creatures who lived and died by the thickness of their coats. It tells us that we have changed, that we have evolved, but that we have not forgotten. The body remembers. The brain remembers. The genes remember. Think of the phantom limb phenomenon, where an amputee can still feel the itch on a toe that is no longer there. The goosebump is a phantom coat phenomenon. The species has been amputated of its fur, but the sensation of it, the neural map of it, the muscular expectation of it, remains vivid and intact. We are walking around wearing the sensory ghost of a fur coat. As the narrative of our species moved forward, this vulnerability drove innovation. Because the Arrector Pili failed us, we had to find other ways to survive. The failure of the biological coat directly led to the invention of the cultural coat. If our hair could still fluff up and keep us warm, would we have learned to stitch hides together? If our skin could resist the frost, would we have mastered the control of fire? Perhaps the tragedy of the vestige was the catalyst for our greatness. The inadequacy of our bodies forced the expansion of our minds. We had to outthink the cold because we could no longer outfluff it. The goosebump, in its futility, was a silent spur, goading us toward technology, toward shelter, toward the mastery of the external world. But tonight, let us simply stay with the feeling. Let us return to the cave. The fire is dying. The embers are glowing a dull, angry red. The cold is winning. The ancestor pulls the deer hide tighter, shivering violently. The teeth chatter, another reflex to generate heat through muscle movement. And on the arms, beneath the borrowed skin of the deer, the human skin ripples. The Arrector Pili stand their ground. They do not know they are useless. They do not know they are obsolete. They are like the Japanese soldier found on an island decades after the war ended, still polishing his rifle, still waiting for the enemy. They are loyal to the end. There is a nobility in this biological stubbornness. It is a testament to the endurance of life. Systems persist. They adapt, they shift, they break, but they persist. And every time you, the modern human, feel that chill, perhaps from an air conditioner that is set too low, or a window left open in winter, and you look down to see the goose flesh rising on your arm, You are shaking hands with that ancestor. You are sharing a physical sensation across a gulf of 50,000 years. You are witnessing a glitch in time. You are feeling the body trying to solve a problem with a tool it lost 1,000,000 years ago. You are feeling the reflex reaching out for a ghost. And in that reaching, in that silent, bumpy, desperate grasping for a warmth that is not there, we find one of the most poignant definitions of what it means to be human, to be vulnerable, to be exposed, and to be carrying the weight of a history that is written in the very texture of our skin. The wind howls outside the cave. The glaciers grind the rock. The world is indifferent and cold. But inside the skin, the tiny muscles hold on, waiting for the fur to return, waiting for the warmth that they were built to protect. They are the keepers of the faith, the silent witnesses to a world that has moved on without them. The night has always been the first enemy. Long before the cold became a bitter adversary in the deep winters of the Pleistocene, the darkness was already a presence that demanded respect. We must cast our minds back to the vast obsidian silence of the prehistoric world, a time when the setting of the sun was not merely a change in lighting, but a fundamental alteration of reality. In the modern world, we banish the night with the flick of a switch. We push back the shadows with LEDs and street lamps. But for our ancestors, the night was a heavy, suffocating blanket that extinguished the safety of the visual world. It is here, in this crushing blackness, that the story of the ghost on your arm takes a sharp and fascinating turn. We have spoken of the Arrector Pili muscles as the architects of warmth, the builders of the thermal coat. But biology is a master of repurposing. It rarely invents a new tool when an old one can be bent to a new task. And so, as the human mind began to expand, as we became creatures of imagination and anxiety, the wiring of the coat became entangled with the wiring of fear. To understand this entanglement, we must journey inward, past the skin and the muscle, into the dense electric forest of the nervous system. Running alongside the spinal cord, like two braided ropes of pearl-colored tissue, lies the sympathetic trunk. This is the ancient highway of the autonomic nervous system, the command center that operates below the threshold of your conscious thought. It is the guardian of the fight-or-flight response, the silent watchman that never sleeps. This system is old. It predates humanity. It predates the mammals. It is a legacy from a time when survival was a binary equation: eat or be eaten, fight or flee. And to this ancient reptile logic, the concept of threat is singular. The sympathetic nervous system does not pause to debate the nuances of danger. It does not distinguish clearly between the physical shock of freezing cold and the emotional shock of mortal terror. Consider the similarities. When the temperature drops rapidly, the body faces an existential crisis, the loss of core heat. When a predator steps out of the shadows, the body faces an existential crisis, the loss of blood and life. To the ancient brain, these are merely two dialects of the same language, the language of survival. Both require immediate mobilization. Both require the heart to pump faster, the blood to retreat from the extremities to protect the organs, and the senses to sharpen. And crucially, both require the coat to rise. So, the goosebump reflex remained tethered to our alarm system. The wire that carried the signal, "It is cold," was bundled together with the wire that carried the signal, "I am afraid." It was a biological synonym, a confusion of circuitry that persists to this day. This is why, when you hear a floorboard creak in an empty house, you feel a chill. You are not cold. You are hearing the echo of an ancient fear responding with the only defense mechanism it knows. Let us paint a scene from the deep past to witness this mechanism in its rawest form. The era is the Middle Paleolithic, perhaps 60,000 years ago. The location is the mouth of a cave in the Zagros Mountains, overlooking a valley bathed in the silver ghostly light of a full moon. Inside the cave, a small clan of humans is gathered. The air smells of wood smoke, curing leather, and the musk of unwashed bodies, the scent of home. They are gathered around the fire, the red flower that is their only weapon against the encroaching night. The fire is small, fed by twisted branches of juniper. Its light is a flickering golden sphere that carves a sanctuary out of the darkness. Inside the circle of light, there is safety. Outside the circle, where the shadows dance and lengthen, lies the domain of the other. The clan is resting. The children are asleep, piled together like puppies for warmth. The elders are dozing, but one, let us call him the Watcher, sits at the edge of the light, his back to the stone, his eyes scanning the boundary where the firelight dies into the dark. The world outside is alive. The wind whispers through the scree. A distant owl calls. But the Watcher is listening for something else. He is listening for the silence that falls when a predator enters the clearing. And then it happens. A snap. It is a small sound, dry and sharp, the breaking of a twig under a heavy padded paw. It comes from the darkness, just beyond the reach of the flames. In that fraction of a second, before the conscious mind can even form the word lion or bear, the ancient machinery kicks into gear. The auditory nerve sends a spike of voltage to the amygdala, the almond-shaped alarm bell in the brain. The amygdala screams. It sends a chemical messenger crashing down into the adrenal glands, which sit atop the kidneys like tri-cornered hats. The floodgates open. Adrenaline, the liquid fire of the body, surges into the bloodstream. It hits the heart, which hammers against the ribs like a trapped bird. It hits the lungs, expanding the bronchioles to pull in more oxygen. It hits the eyes, dilating the pupils until they are black pools, desperate to catch every photon of light. And it hits the skin. The Arrector Pili muscles, dormant a moment ago, snap to attention. A wave of contraction sweeps over the Watcher's body. It starts at the base of the neck, the hackles, and ripples down the spine, spreading out across the shoulders and down the arms. In the days of our primate ancestors, this moment would have been spectacular. The thick, dark mane around the neck and shoulders would have flared outward. The silhouette of the creature would have instantly doubled in bulk. It was a visual shout, a bluff of biological vanity. It said to the predator in the dark, "Look how large I am. Look how much chaos I can bring. I am not prey. I am a monster." But the Watcher is a human. He has walked through the fires of the great shedding. He has lost the mane. So, as the adrenaline commands the muscles to pull, there is nothing to fluff. The Arrector Pili tug violently at the skin, but they lift only the tiny, invisible vellus hairs. The skin bunches up. The texture changes from smooth to rough. We call it goose flesh. But in this moment, it is the texture of terror. The Watcher stands there, naked and vulnerable, with only the bumpy braille of his skin to show for his readiness. He grips his spear, a sharpened stick with a flint tip hardened in the fire. His knuckles are white. He is a small, soft creature facing a beast of muscle and claw. The biological shield has failed him, leaving him with only the psychological comfort of the reflex. He feels the skin on the back of his neck tighten. He feels the creeps. It is a sensation of profound exposure. The very mechanism that was designed to make him look dominant now serves only to remind him of his fragility. He is trying to bristle a mane that no longer exists. He is a king without a crown, a warrior without armor. But perhaps there is a hidden utility in this failure. As the watcher stiffens, his skin rippling with fear, the others in the cave wake up. They see his posture. They see the tension in his frame. And though the firelight is dim, they might see the change in the texture of his skin. We are visually acute creatures. We are experts at reading the micro signals of our kin. When the tribe sees the watcher bristle, mirror neurons in their own brains fire. The fear is contagious. It jumps from one body to another, not through words, but through the shared language of the sympathetic nervous system. Suddenly, the whole tribe is awake. The whole tribe is alert. The adrenaline cascade that started in one man has now primed the entire group. They grab their weapons. They grab the children. They stand together, a phalanx of shivering, goosebumped primates, facing the dark as one. In this sense, the goosebump became a silent signal to the tribe. It was a visible manifestation of the instinct to survive. It was a way of shouting, "Danger!" without making a sound. The fear was no longer just felt internally. It was worn upon the surface of the body, a warning beacon written in flesh. Let us deepen the context of this wiring of fear. Why did the brain never disentangle the cold from the fear? Why, after millions of years, do we still get chills when we are scared? Perhaps it is because the sensation of cold and the sensation of fear are phenomenologically identical. Think of the language we use. We speak of freezing with terror. We speak of cold-blooded killers. We say a chill ran down our spine. When you are terrified, the blood drains from your skin. The sympathetic nervous system constricts the capillaries in the extremities, pulling the warm blood deep into the core to protect the vital organs, the heart, the lungs, the brain. This is a preparation for trauma. If the leopard bites your arm, you will bleed less if the vessels are clamped shut. But the result of this vasoconstriction is that the skin actually does become cold. The temperature of the surface drops. So, in a moment of high fear, you are physically cold. The brain's confusion is not really confusion at all. It is an accurate reading of the body's state. You are terrified. Therefore, you are cold. Therefore, you must raise the coat. The logic is circular, unbreakable, and ancient. Let us return to the watcher. The snap in the brush turns out to be nothing. Perhaps a dry branch falling under its own weight, or a small scavenger passing by. The silence returns. The eyes in the dark do not materialize. Slowly, the adrenaline fades. The heart slows its frantic drumming. The capillaries in the skin reopen, and the warm blood flushes back into the arms and legs. The Arrector Pili muscles, exhausted from their vigil, relax. The bumps smooth out. The skin returns to its resting state. But the memory of the sensation remains. The watcher sits back down, but he is changed. He has felt the ghost of the mane. He has felt the ancient animal inside him trying to break free. This day in the life of a fear response helps us understand why we still carry this trait. In the modern world, we rarely face leopards. We face deadlines, public speaking, social rejection, and the abstract anxieties of the future. Yet, the machinery is the same. When you stand up to give a speech and your mouth goes dry and your skin prickles, you are standing at the mouth of the cave. When you watch a horror movie and the music swells with that dissonant, screeching violin and your arms break out in bumps, you are reacting to the snap in the brush. The wiring of fear is a direct line to the Pleistocene. It is a reminder that civilization is a very thin veneer over a very old biology. We have built cities of glass and steel. We have deciphered the atom and the genome. But when the lights go out, we are still the same scared little primates, waiting for the fur to stand up and save us. And there is a peculiar intimacy in this shared terror. In the prehistoric world, this shared physiological response forged bonds. To shiver together, whether from cold or from fear, is to be united. It is to acknowledge a shared vulnerability. The heebie-jeebies, that feeling of the skin crawling, is perhaps the sensation of the Arrector Pili writhing in frustration. They want to do their job. They want to make you look big. They want to protect you. But they are trapped in a body that has chosen a different path. The path of nakedness, of tool use, of intellect. So they pull at the skin, tugging at the leash, frantic and impotent. It is interesting to note that this reaction is often most intense on the back of the neck and the forearms. These are the areas that would have been most heavily bristled in our ancestors. The hackles raising is a phrase we use for dogs, but it applies to us too. The skin on the nape of the neck is a sensor array, the place where we feel the gaze of the watcher, the breath of the pursuer. When the hair stands up there, it is the body trying to protect the jugular, trying to armor the most vulnerable point of entry for a predator's teeth. As we drift toward sleep, let us honor this awkward, bumpy signal. It is not a flaw. It is a war story. It is a scar of survival. The fact that you can feel your skin crawl means that thousands of generations of your ancestors felt it too, and they survived the moment that caused it. They heard the snap, they felt the chill, they bristled, and they lived to pass that wiring on to you. The fear was worn upon the surface of the body so that the body might survive to see the dawn. And though the mane is gone, the memory of the lion remains, etched in the microscopic twitch of the muscle, a silent alarm system that will never be disconnected. The fire had always been there, a flickering companion in the long night of our species. But there came a moment, untraceable in the fossil record, yet undeniable in the legacy of our hearts, when the fire moved inside. We must cast our imagination into the delicate, misty dawn of the Upper Paleolithic, perhaps 40 or 50,000 years ago. The physical world was much the same. The ice still gripped the north, the lions still prowled the south, but the internal world of the human being was undergoing a metamorphosis as profound as the formation of a star. We were no longer merely clever apes chipping flint to cut meat. We were becoming something else. We were becoming creatures of the story. We were becoming vessels of the invisible. The brain, expanding like a blooming flower within the skull, began to fold in upon itself, creating deep valleys and high ridges of neural tissue capable of processing not just information, but meaning. And in this expansion, in this quiet explosion of consciousness, the ancient wiring of the body began to cross. The survival systems, honed over millions of years of freezing nights and saber-tooth pursuits, began to listen to a new master. The ghost on the arm, the Arrector Pili muscle that had served the simple lords of heat and fear, found itself hijacked by a new and mysterious sovereign: emotion. To understand this bridge, we must sit quietly in the corner of a limestone cave in the Dordogne Valley. Outside, the autumn rain is a relentless drumbeat against the earth, smelling of wet limestone and decaying oak leaves. Inside, the air is warm, thick with the scent of burning juniper and the comfort of the clan. In the center of the shelter, a woman holds an infant. The child is sick. Its breath is shallow. Its skin is hot. The mother does not sleep. She watches the rise and fall of that tiny chest with a focus that excludes the rest of the universe. In the deep past, in the reptilian brain, the survival instinct was selfish. It was about my skin, my blood, my life. But here, a rewiring has occurred. The mother feels the distress of the child as if it were her own. When the child cries, a thin, reedy sound that pierces the quiet, the mother's body reacts with a violence that defies logic. Her heart races, her pupils dilate, and suddenly a wave washes over her arms and shoulders. Her skin tightens. The tiny hairs stand on end. She gets goosebumps. Why? The cave is not cold. There is no leopard in the shadows. Why is she deploying the biological shield? She is deploying it because the lines have crossed. The limbic system, the newly renovated seat of emotion in the mammal brain, has tapped into the ancient distress signals of the hypothalamus. To the deep brain, the threat of losing the child is interpreted as a threat to survival itself. The emotional pain of the potential loss is registered as a physical shock. The body prepares to fight, to flee, to do something to save the life that matters more than its own. The goosebump here is no longer a trap for warm air. It is a somatic manifestation of love. It is the body bracing itself against the terror of grief. It is the physical sensation of a bond so strong that it hurts. The mother is bristling not to look big to a predator, but to stand as a fortress for her child. This was the first bridge, the transition from the shivering of cold to the shivering of care. But the bridge extended further, reaching out to connect not just mother and child, but the entire tribe. We must look at the birth of empathy, that silent telepathy that allows us to feel what another is feeling. Let us move to the campfire circle. The hunt is over. The men have returned, carrying the carcass of an ibex, but they also carry the memory of the cliff. One of the hunters stands to speak. He is scarred, his skin marked by the thorns of the scrubland. The firelight catches the whites of his eyes as he begins to recount the near miss. He uses his hands. He mimics the sound of the sliding scree. He lowers his voice to a whisper to describe the moment his foot slipped, the sickening lurch of gravity, the scramble for a handhold, the rocks clattering down into the abyss below. The tribe listens. They are safe. They are sitting on furs, bellies full, protected by the fire. But look at their skin. As the hunter reaches the climax of his story, the moment of almost death, a collective shiver runs through the circle. The listeners feel the drop in their own stomachs. Their own palms sweat. And on their arms, the Arrector Pili muscles contract. This is a miracle of biology. This is the mirror neuron system at work. The brains of the listeners are simulating the experience of the teller. They are running a virtual reality simulation of the fall. The ancient brain, hearing the distress in the voice and seeing the fear in the face, decides that the danger is real enough to warrant a reaction. "Prepare," it whispers. "We are falling!" And so the tribe shivers together. They get goosebumps in unison. In that shared physical reaction, the boundary between I and you dissolves. The goosebump becomes a social glue. It binds the group together in a shared experience of survival. They survived the fall with him. The emotional chill is the physical evidence that they are one organism, feeling the same wind, fearing the same dark. This synchronization of the skin was a profound evolutionary advantage. A tribe that could feel each other's fear, that could resonate with each other's experiences, was a tribe that could coordinate, cooperate, and protect one another. The vestigial reflex was no longer useless. It had been repurposed as a tool of social cohesion. But the expansion of consciousness did not stop at empathy. It reached upward, toward the sublime. It reached toward the mystery of the world itself. Imagine a night when the sky betrayed them. A lunar eclipse. The silver eye of the moon, the guardian of the night, slowly begins to be eaten by a shadow. It turns a blood red. The stars seem to burn brighter in the unnatural darkness. The ancient humans stand in the open field, looking up. They have no astronomy. They have no math to predict this. To them, it is a cosmic violation. It is a dragon eating the light. The fear they feel is not the sharp, hot fear of the predator. It is a cold, vast, crushing awe. It is the feeling of being small in the face of the infinite. The brain struggles to categorize this input. It is new. It is overwhelming. The sensory data floods the cortex, searching for a pattern, but finding none. The system overloads. And in that moment of cognitive dissonance, that mixture of terror, beauty, and confusion, the body falls back on its oldest trick. The wave hits. The skin crawls. The hair stands up. This is the birth of Frisson, the aesthetic chill, the spiritual shiver. The body is preparing for a fight-or-flight response, but there is nowhere to run to and nothing to fight. The threat is not a physical object. The threat is the sheer scale of reality. The Arrector Pili contract to make the human look bigger, but against the cosmos, we remain dust. In this moment, the goosebump became a symptom of the soul. It became the body's way of saying, I am in the presence of something greater than myself. It was the somatic signature of the divine. We see this legacy clearly in the history of our species. The shaman shaken in a trance, the warrior trembling before the totem, the silence of the congregation in the cathedral. In every instance, the skin is playing its part in the ritual. The Holy Ghost is felt quite literally as a ghost on the skin. And then there is the mystery of sound, the music of the code. Somewhere in the deep past, perhaps in the echoey chambers of a cave, a human voice learned to sing. It learned to hold a note, to modulate the pitch, to cry out not in pain, but in melody. Why does music give us goosebumps? Why does a perfect harmony or a swelling crescendo cause the hair on our arms to rise? Scientists believe this, too, is a crossed wire in the emotional bridge. The sound of a human voice cracking with emotion, or a high-pitched instrument like a flute or violin, mimics the acoustic properties of a separation call, the distress cry of a baby primate separated from its mother. When we hear that sound, even buried within a beautiful symphony, our ancient brain hears a child in trouble. It hears a loss of connection. It triggers the vigilance response. Wake up! Someone is lost! The skin prickles. The attention sharpens. But then the music resolves. The chord changes from minor to major. The tension is released. The brain realizes there is no danger, only beauty. The dopamine floods in, mixing with the adrenaline. The result is that exquisite, pleasurable shiver that travels down the neck and spine. We are enjoying a biological false alarm. We are turning the ancient anxiety of separation into the modern pleasure of art. Consider the complexity of the creature that can do this. We are using a muscle designed to puff up fur against the ice to appreciate a sonata. We are using a reflex designed to scare away hyenas to feel the grandeur of God. This emotional bridge is what makes us human. It is the ability to take the raw materials of survival and transmute them into the gold of experience. As the generations faded into dust, this trait remained, growing stronger in its new role. The humans who felt these chills were the humans who were paying attention. They were the ones who were deeply connected to their kin, deeply attuned to the environment, and deeply moved by the group rituals. The chill became a marker of significance. When you feel it, your body is marking the moment with a red flag. It is saying, remember this. This matters. This is real. Think of the last time you felt it. Perhaps it was at a wedding, watching two people promise their lives to one another. Perhaps it was standing on a mountaintop, the wind tearing at your clothes, the world spread out below you like a map. Perhaps it was listening to a piece of music that seemed to speak to a sorrow you hadn't named. In that moment, you were not cold. You were not afraid in the traditional sense. You were vibrating with the intangible weight of the moment. Your Arrector Pili muscles, those microscopic weavers of the coat, were doing their best to clothe you. But they were not clothing you in fur. They were clothing you in the moment itself. They were trying to capture the electricity of the emotion and trap it against your skin, just as they once trapped the warm air of the Eocene. The goosebump had completed its migration. It had started as a brick in the fortress of warmth. It had become a weapon in the arsenal of fear. And finally, it had become a string on the instrument of the heart. It is a silent witness to the fact that we are not just biological machines seeking homeostasis. We are resonance chambers. We are built to ring like bells when we are struck by the beauty and the terror of existence. And so, the skin remains the borderland. It is the place where the inner world meets the outer world. And the goosebump is the diplomat that travels between them. As we lie in the dark, let us appreciate this bridge. It connects the grunt of the primate to the sonnet of the poet. It connects the shiver of the frozen night to the shiver of the first kiss. It is the physical proof that our biology has not just survived the ages, but has deepened with them. The ghost on your arm is no longer just a memory of the cold. It is a testament to the warmth of the human spirit. A spirit that learned to feel so deeply that the body had to invent a new way to express it. There is a moment, rare, fleeting, and profound, when the chatter of the mind falls silent, and the boundaries of the self seem to dissolve into something much larger. We have all felt it. It is the moment you stand on the rim of a canyon, looking down into a geologic abyss carved by time itself, and you feel a sudden, crushing sense of vertigo that has nothing to do with falling. It is the moment you step out of a car on a lonely road, far from the light pollution of the cities, and look up to see the Milky Way stretching across the velvet sky like a river of diamond dust. In that instant of sublime insignificance, a wave washes over you. It begins at the base of the skull, a phantom electrical charge that ripples down the spine, spreading out across the shoulders and flowing down the arms. The skin tightens, the breath catches, and there, on the surface of your forearm, the tiny mountains rise. The Arrector Pili muscles, the ancient guardians of warmth and the soldiers of fear, snap to attention. But you are not cold. The desert air might be warm. You are not afraid. There is no predator stalking you in the brush. You are safe. And yet, your body is reacting with the same visceral intensity as the ancestor facing the wolf or the blizzard. Scientists call this phenomenon Frisson, a French word meaning a shiver or a thrill. It is the aesthetic chill. It is the skin's applause for the beauty of the world. But to the paleoanthropologist, it is something even more magical. It is a unique evolutionary repurposing, a moment where the hardware of the beast was hijacked by the software of the soul. It is the story of how a thermal reflex became a spiritual sensor. To understand this transformation, we must step back into the theater of the prehistoric world. But this time, we are not looking at the ground, hunting for tracks. We are looking at the horizon. Imagine an ancestor, perhaps Homo heidelbergensis, standing on a high ridge in the Great Rift Valley 500,000 years ago. The sun is setting, painting the sky in violent shades of violet and bruised orange. Below, the Savannah stretches out to infinity, a golden ocean teeming with the great herds. A storm is brewing in the distance, a towering anvil of cumulonimbus clouds flashing with silent lightning. For a creature of pure survival, this scene contains data. The lightning means fire, the clouds mean rain, the herds mean food. But as the brain expanded, as the neocortex folded over the limbic system, a new capacity began to emerge. The ancestor did not just see the data, they felt the scale, the sheer vastness of the landscape, the power of the storm, the indifference of the distance. It triggered a cognitive override. The brain was confronted with something so big that it defied immediate categorization. It was not a predator, but it was powerful. It was not a mate, but it was compelling. It was a safe threat. This is the central theory of why we feel awe. The brain, confronted with something vast or beautiful, experiences a split second of confusion. The sensory input is overwhelming. The optic nerves are flooding the visual cortex with information, the millions of stars, the endless drop of the canyon. The pattern recognition software of the mind stutters. It cannot fully grasp the magnitude of what it is seeing. In this moment of hesitation, the ancient alarm system wakes up. The amygdala, seeing the vastness, whispers, "This is too big. This is powerful. Be ready." It taps the adrenal gland. A microdose of adrenaline is released. The heart rate spikes. The Arrector Pili contract. The body prepares for flight. But simultaneously, the frontal cortex, the seat of reason and logic, analyzes the situation and sends a countersignal. "It is okay," it says. "The storm is far away. The canyon is stable. You are not in danger." The result is a biochemical collision. The fear, adrenaline, collides with the relief and the pleasure of discovery, dopamine. The brain realizes it is in the presence of something safe, but overwhelming. It transmutes the terror into wonder. The flight response is arrested mid-stride, and instead of running, we freeze. We stare, and the energy that would have gone into the muscles of the legs is released as a shiver across the skin. We bristle, not to fight, but to feel. Let us linger on this day in the life of the awakening mind. The sun has fully set now. The ancestor remains on the ridge. The stars have come out. In the Pleistocene, the night sky was a presence of terrifying brilliance. There was no smog, no electric light to dull the heavens. The center of the galaxy hung like a luminous cloud overhead. The ancestor looks up. The neck cranes back. This posture, the exposure of the throat, is itself an act of vulnerability. In the animal kingdom, to expose the neck is to invite death. But in the state of awe, we surrender. We tilt our heads back and open our chests. As the starlight hits the retina, the chill begins. It is a sensation of expansion. The body feels small, yet connected to the immensity. The Arrector Pili rise, trying to create a boundary, but the mind has already crossed it. This vestige of the animal has become the censor of the divine. We no longer bristle to frighten enemies. We bristle because we are touched by the grandeur of existence. Consider the role of prospect and refuge in this evolutionary tale. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that humans have a deep-seated love for high places, prospect, that offer a view, combined with a sense of safety, refuge. We love to sit in a cave looking out, or stand on a balcony, or hike to a peak. When our ancestors climbed to the top of a hill, they gained a survival advantage. They could see the predators coming. They could spot the water holes. The brain rewarded this behavior with a hit of dopamine. "Good job," the chemistry said. "You can see everything from here." But when the view was truly spectacular, when the prospect was limitless, the reward system went into overdrive. The pleasure of safety mixed with the vertigo of height. The result was the shudder of awe. It was the body physically marking the moment of highest perspective. Over thousands of generations, this reaction became encoded not just as a survival tool, but as an aesthetic one. We began to seek out the high places not just to find game, but to feel the shiver. We began to climb the mountain because the mountain made us feel alive. The ghost muscle became a guide. It told us where the power was. As we moved into the Neolithic and began to build our own worlds, we tried to replicate this feeling. We became architects of the chill. Think of the great megaliths, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids. Why did we drag stones weighing 50 tons across the landscape? Why did we stack them in alignments that pointed to the solstice sun or the rising of Sirius? We were trying to build a machine that could generate awe. Imagine the Neolithic pilgrim approaching the stone circle at dusk. The sheer size of the blocks, standing against the flat horizon, would have been impossible to ignore. These were not natural rocks. They were intentions made solid. Walking into the center of the circle, surrounded by the silent giants, the pilgrim would feel that familiar tightening of the scalp, that wave down the back. The architecture mimicked the canyon. It mimicked the forest of giants. It created a space of sacred terror. When the tribe gathered there and the chanting began, the collective Frisson would have been a unifying force. To shiver together in the presence of the stones was to acknowledge that the tribe belonged to something permanent. The Arrector Pili were now working for the priests and the shamans. They were confirming the presence of the gods. If the ritual was successful, the people would leave with their skin crawling, convinced that they had touched the other world. And what of the caves, the dark cathedrals of the Paleolithic? Let us descend into the earth, into the painted chambers of Lascaux or Chauvet. The air is cool here, yes, but the shiver the artist feels is not from the temperature. The artist holds a torch, the flickering light dancing over the undulating rock walls. With charcoal and ochre, they paint a bison, a lion, a herd of horses. They use the natural curves of the stone to give the animals muscle and movement. When the torch flares, the animals seem to run. The artist steps back. They look at their creation. And in the silence of the cave, the hair on their arms stands up. Why? Because they have done something godlike. They have captured the spirit of the beast. They have created a second reality. The image is so powerful, so resonant, that the brain reacts as if the animal were real, yet knows it is art. This aesthetic arrest, this moment of being stopped in one's tracks by beauty, is the modern function of the goosebump. The Arrector Pili applauds the beauty of the world. It is a standing ovation performed by the skin. This connection between the visual and the visceral is a profound mystery. Why should a pattern of colors, or a pile of rocks, or a view of the horizon trigger a thermal reflex. It suggests that for the human animal, meaning is a physical event. We do not just think about beauty, we metabolize it. We process it through the same pathways that process heat and pain. A beautiful sunset strikes us. A profound idea hits us. We are touched by a gesture. Our language reveals the somatic nature of our emotions. And the goosebump is the visible sign of this impact. It is the moment the external world penetrates the armor of the self and vibrates the core. Let us return to the idea of the vestigial phantom from the earlier chapters, but view it now through this lens of awe. The phantom coat that we try to raise is no longer just a coat of fur. It has become a coat of sensibility. When you listen to a piece of music that builds to a thundering crescendo, perhaps the swelling strings of an orchestra or the guttural roar of a choir, you are hearing the auditory equivalent of the thunderstorm on the Savannah. The volume, the complexity, the frequency range, it mimics the roar of nature. Your ancient brain hears the thunder. It hears the stampede. It prepares the defenses, the Arrector Pili contract. But then, the harmony resolves. The threat dissolves into melody. And the tension that was gathering in the muscles is released as a wave of pure pleasure. The chill runs from the nape of the neck to the heels. You feel as though you are expanding, as though you are floating. This is the skin-gasm, the Frisson. It is the biological reward for paying attention. It is the body saying, "This is important. This is vast. Do not forget this." In the modern world, we are often starved of awe. We live in climate-controlled boxes. We look at small screens. We rarely see the horizon. We rarely see the stars. The Arrector Pili spend most of their time dormant, or reacting to the mundane chill of an air conditioner. But the capacity remains, and when we find it, we drink it in like water in the desert. This is why we travel. This is why we go to the Grand Canyon, to the Alps, to the great cathedrals of Europe. We are hunting for the shiver. We are looking for that moment where the scale of the world reasserts itself and makes us feel small. There is a profound comfort in this smallness. In the chill of awe, the ego disappears. The worries of the self, the bills, the arguments, the deadlines, vanish in the face of the massive. For a moment, we are just a biological witness to the universe. We are just a pair of eyes and a patch of shivering skin standing before the glory of time. The Arrector Pili help us achieve this ego death. By activating the fight-or-flight system but providing no enemy to fight, the body is left in a state of high arousal and high openness. We are braced, but we are open. We are ready to receive. And perhaps, in this deep time perspective, we can see the goosebump as a form of communication not just with the tribe, but with the future. Think of the astronaut, the ultimate journey of the naked ape. They sit atop a controlled explosion, leaving the atmosphere, leaving the very environment that shaped their biology. They look out the window of the capsule and see the Earth, a blue marble hanging in the utter blackness of space. The overview effect. Astronauts report a cognitive shift, a profound sense of awe and connection to the planet, and invariably, they report the chill, the hair standing on end in zero gravity. The Arrector Pili evolved in the Eocene forests to trap warmth, evolved on the Savannah to bluff predators, are now reacting to the sight of the home planet from the void. They are trying to fluff up a coat in a vacuum. It is the ultimate absurdity and the ultimate beauty. The ghost muscle is saluting the earth. So, the next time you feel that shiver, when you read a line of poetry that rings true, when you see a child take their first step, When you stand under the canopy of an ancient redwood forest, do not dismiss it as a draft. Stop. Close your eyes. Feel the wave move over your skin. Recognize it for what it is. It is the ghost of the furry past, bowing down to the ghost of the divine present. It is your body acknowledging that you have stumbled upon something true. It is the ancient animal part of you agreeing with the modern spiritual part of you. You are a creature built of mud and starlight, of reflex and reason. And in the chill of awe, those two halves become one. The skin ripples, the muscles pull, and for a heartbeat, you are wearing the oldest coat of all, the coat of wonder. The wind blows through the canyon, the stars wheel overhead in their slow, silent dance. And down here, on the surface of the earth, the small naked apes stand and shiver, not from the cold, but from the sheer privilege of being awake in such a magnificent universe. The silence of the pre-human world was never truly empty. If we were to transport ourselves back to the deep velvet nights of the Pleistocene, to a time before the first flute was carved from the bone of a vulture, we would not find a world void of music. We would find a world alive with the raw, chaotic, and terrifying orchestra of the earth itself. The wind has always been a musician, playing the high, whistling notes through the needles of the pine forests and the low, mournful bass through the hollows of the canyon. The water has always been a drummer, beating its relentless rhythm against the shore, a pulse as steady as the rotation of the planet. But for the creature standing in the dark, our ancestor, the naked ape with the shivering skin, sound was not an aesthetic experience. It was a map. It was a warning system. It was a matter of life and death. To understand why a haunting melody can cause the hair on your arms to stand up today, we must first understand the architecture of the ear that was built in those ancient shadows. We must treat the ear not as a concert hall, but as a fortress. Deep within the skull, encased in the hardest bone of the body, lies the cochlea. It is a tiny, spiral-shaped cathedral, lined with thousands of microscopic hairs that dance in the fluid of the inner ear. These hairs are the sentinels of the frequency spectrum. For millions of years, they were tuned to a specific set of vibrations. The snap of a dry twig under a heavy paw, the hiss of a snake in the grass, the guttural grunt of a rival, the terrified shriek of a child. In the wild theater of the past, there was no background noise. There was no hum of electricity, no drone of traffic. There was only the signal and the noise. And the brain, that relentless pattern-seeking machine, was constantly scanning the acoustic horizon, waiting for a break in the pattern. When a sound pierced the silence, it was a biological event. A sudden loud noise, a thunderclap, a roar, triggered an immediate violent contraction of the defensive systems. The startle reflex. The body froze. The heart stopped, then hammered. And the skin reacted. The Arrector Pili muscles, which we have followed through this journey from the warmth of the Eocene coat to the bluff of the Savannah, were wired directly into this auditory alarm system. When the roar hit the ear, the muscles snapped tight. The fur puffed up. The creature became bigger, shielded, ready for the impact. This is the foundational layer of the music of the code. The reason a sudden booming drum or a crashing orchestral hit gives you a jolt is because, for a split second, your body thinks the sky is falling. It thinks the predator has pounced. But the mystery of the chill, the frisson, is more subtle than just a startle. It is found not in the roar, but in the cry. Let us drift to a scene of profound vulnerability. A mother and her infant in the tall grass of the Pliocene. The infant has wandered too far. The sun is setting. The temperature is dropping. The infant realizes it is alone. It emits a sound. It is a specific, high-pitched, undulating wail. Scientists call this the separation call. It is a sound shared by almost all mammals, from the kitten to the wolf pup to the human baby. It is acoustically designed to be impossible to ignore. It occupies a frequency range that cuts through the wind and the background noise of the insects. It is jagged. It is urgent. When the mother hears this sound, her biology is hijacked. The sound waves hit her ear, travel to the brainstem, and ignite the limbic system. A wave of distress washes over her. She feels the child's fear in her own body. Her skin crawls. Her hair stands on end. This chill is the physical manifestation of empathy. It is the body preparing to rush into danger to save the kin. The goosebumps are a sign that the bond of attachment has been pulled taut, vibrating like a plucked string. Now, fast forward 50,000 years. You are sitting in a darkened room, listening to a solo violinist playing a slow, mournful adagio. The violinist draws the bow across the string, creating a high, trembling note that rises and falls, mimicking the prosody of a weeping voice. Your conscious mind knows you are safe. You know this is wood and horsehair and steel. But your ancient brain, the listener in the shadows, hears the separation call. It hears the cry of the lost child. It hears the solitude of the species. And so, the Arrector Pili contract. You get chills. This is the emotional bridge we spoke of, extended into the realm of art. Music is the super stimulus that hacks into the ancient communication channels of our lineage. A cello played with vibrato mimics the human voice in the throes of deep emotion. A flute mimics the bird calls that signaled the morning. A drum mimics the heartbeat of the runner. When music moves us, it is because it is playing the strings of our survival instincts, but with a bow made of beauty. Let us explore the mechanics of expectation and release, for this is where the goosebump finds its most dramatic expression. The human brain is a prediction engine. It is constantly guessing what will happen in the next second, the next minute. This was essential for survival. If you could predict the path of the antelope, you ate. If you could predict the storm, you stayed dry. Music plays a game with this prediction engine. It establishes a pattern, a melody, a rhythm, a key. The brain locks on to this pattern. I know this, it says. I am safe. But then the music changes. It introduces a dissonance, a minor chord, a delay in the beat. The pattern is broken. To the ancient brain, a broken pattern is a threat. It signals that the environment has changed. Alert, the amygdala whispers. Something is wrong. The tension builds. The body tightens. The Arrector Pili prepare to fire. We feel this as a pleasurable anxiety, a longing or a yearning in the music. And then comes the resolution. The chord resolves to the tonic. The beat drops. The crescendo crashes into harmony. The brain realizes that the threat was a false alarm. The danger was just a game. In a flood of relief, the brain releases dopamine, the reward chemical, into the striatum. But the adrenaline of the arousal is still in the system. The result of this chemical cocktail, dopamine mixed with adrenaline, relief mixed with arousal, is the shiver, the skin-gasm. The energy that was gathered to fight the breaking pattern is released as a wave of sensation across the skin. The Arrector Pili contract, not to trap heat, but to mark the moment of emotional climax. It is the body singing along. Imagine the first time this happened, not with a violin, but with the voice. Picture a cave in the Swabian Jura, 40,000 years ago. The ice is thick outside. The clan is gathered deep in the belly of the earth, where the acoustics are reverberant and strange. The fire is low. A woman begins to hum. It is not a word. It is a tone. She holds it, letting it bounce off the wet limestone walls. Then others join in. They find the harmony. They lock their voices together. The sound grows. It fills the small space, becoming louder than it should be, amplified by the stone. To the primitive mind, this is magic. The cave itself is singing. The vibration enters their chests, rattling the ribs. In that moment of synchronized sound, the tribe feels a collective chill. They look at each other, their eyes wide in the firelight, their skin rippling. They are united by the vibration. They are no longer separate individuals. They are a single organism, bound by the music of the code. This was the birth of ritual. This was the birth of the sacred. The goosebump became the physical seal of the group bond. To shiver together was to belong together. We must also consider the sound of the sublime. Low-frequency sounds, infrasound, have a peculiar effect on the human body. In nature, these deep, earth-shaking vibrations are produced by earthquakes, volcanoes, avalanches, and the roars of large predators like tigers. When we hear a sound below 20 hertz, we often cannot hear it with our ears, but we feel it. The fluid in the body vibrates. The inner ear is disturbed. It creates a sense of unease, of a presence in the room. Modern music uses this deep bass to trigger the awe response. The pipe organ in a cathedral, with its massive 32-foot pipes, produces frequencies that shake the floor. The sub-bass in a movie theater during a moment of suspense does the same. The Arrector Pili detect this vibration. They sense the rumble of the giant. They rise to meet it. When you feel a piece of music in your chest and your skin breaks out in bumps, you are reacting to the acoustic signature of a titan. You are feeling the footsteps of the mammoth or the grinding of the glacier. And what of acoustic roughness? This is a term scientists use to describe sounds that change amplitude very quickly. Screams, growls, diapason. These sounds target the amygdala directly. They bypass the processing centers of the higher brain. When a rock singer screams into the microphone or a jazz saxophonist growls a note, they are introducing roughness. They are mimicking the sound of a creature in fury or pain. The listener's skin reacts to the wildness of the sound. We enjoy it because we are in a safe environment. We are riding the roller coaster of fear without the danger of the fall. The goosebump is the thrill of the ride. Let us return to the ghost on the arm. There is a theory that the musical chill is related to the feeling of being touched. When we are groomed, when a mother strokes a child's hair or a lover traces a line down the arm, the skin releases endorphins. It is a calming, bonding signal. Music acts as a remote caress. The sound waves physically touch the skin. They move the air against the fine vellus hairs. A gentle whispering melody can feel like a breath on the neck. A sweeping orchestral passage can feel like a warm embrace. The Arrector Pili, those tiny muscles anchored to the hairs, are sensitive to this tactile illusion. They contract as if responding to a physical touch. The music is quite literally touching you. The ghost is not just the memory of fur, it is the memory of the grooming hand. As we drift deeper into the modern age, we are surrounded by a cacophony of artificial sounds. But the music of the code remains the skeleton key to our emotions. Think of a day in the life of your own listening. You are driving in your car. the world rushing by in a blur of gray and green. You are tired. Your mind is full of the static of the day. Then, a song comes on the radio. Maybe it is a song from your youth. Maybe it is a piece you have never heard before. It starts with a simple piano line, a lonely, wandering pattern. Your brain latches onto it. Then the voice enters. It is fragile, human, imperfect. You feel a tightening in your throat. The lump forms, another vestigial reflex related to the glottis opening for oxygen during fight or flight. Then the drums kick in, the heartbeat. Your own heart entrains to the rhythm. The music builds. It climbs a ladder of notes, higher and higher, creating a tension that demands release. You are waiting for the drop. You are waiting for the summit. And when it hits, when the chorus explodes or the key changes, the wave breaks. The sensation starts behind your ears. It flows down your neck like warm water. It spirals down your spine. And on your forearms, the landscape changes. The tiny muscles pull. The skin ripples. For a few seconds, you are not a driver in a car. You are a biological conduit for pure sensation. You are an ancient creature feeling the thunder, hearing the cry, sensing the tribe, and finding safety in the storm. This is the bridge across time. It connects the guttural calls of our primate ancestors to the symphonies of the modern age. When a song gives you chills, it is because your biology is listening with the ears of a creature that needed to hear every twig snap. But your mind is interpreting it with the heart of a poet. The Arrector Pili does not know the difference between Mozart and a murmur in the dark. It only knows intensity. It only knows that something matters. And in a world that can often feel numb, this reaction is a gift. It is a reminder that we are still wild beneath our clothes. We are still capable of resonance. We are still tuned to the frequency of the universe. The music fades. The song ends. The silence returns to the car. The muscles relax. The skin smooths out. But the feeling remains, a lingering echo of the ghost. You have been visited by the deep past. You have been touched by the music of the code. As we prepare for the final chapter of our story, look at your skin one last time. It is a manuscript written in a language of bumps and shivers. It has told us of the cold, of the fear, of the love, and now, of the beauty. It is time to bring the story home, to see the legacy of this trait not just as a history lesson, but as a living, breathing part of who you are tonight. The journey ends here, not in the vast, windswept savannas of the Pliocene, nor in the damp, echoing caves of the Ice Age, but in the quiet, intimate geography of the here and now. The fire has burned down to embers. The stories of the ancestors have been told. The world outside your window is dark, settled into the rhythm of the modern night. But before you close your eyes, before you let the conscious mind drift away into the tide of sleep, I ask you to perform one final act of observation. Turn your arm over. Let the soft light of the room fall across the inner surface of your forearm. To the casual eye, it is merely skin. It is smooth, perhaps pale or dark, marked by the faint blue tracery of veins, the rivers of life flowing beneath the surface. It appears modern, a biological casing suited for a world of climate control and soft fabrics. It seems far removed from the claw, the fang, and the frost. But beneath that calm, hairless surface lies a secret history. Beneath the epidermis, buried in the deep red soil of the dermis, lies a sleeping army of millions. These are the Arrector Pili. They are the microscopic sentinels we have followed through the epochs. They are the loyal soldiers of a war we won eons ago, stationed at posts that time has forgotten, waiting for a signal from a world that no longer exists. They are quiet now. The air in the room is still. But they are there, anchored to the roots of hairs so fine they are almost invisible, holding their tension, maintaining the structural integrity of a defense system that was designed to save your life in a forest that turned to coal 50 million years ago. This is the legacy on the arm. It is not a metaphor. It is a physical reality. You are not just a vessel for the past. You are built out of it. We often think of history as something written in books, or buried in the strata of rock, or preserved in the artifacts of museums. We think of the past as something back there, separated from us by the insurmountable wall of time. But biology knows no such separation. To your body, the past is not past. It is present. It is functioning. The machinery that kept Australopithecus warm on a windy ridge is the same machinery that tightens your skin when the air conditioner hums to life. The reflex that puffed up the fur of Homo habilis to bluff a leopard is the same reflex that prickles your neck when you hear a strange noise in the hallway. We are walking, breathing palimpsests, documents that have been written over again and again, yet the original text still shows through. Let us trace the ghost one last time, seeing how it weaves through the tapestry of your daily life, often without you even noticing. Think of the morning. You step out of the warmth of your bed, or perhaps you step out of a hot shower. The water beads on your skin, warm and comforting. Then, you open the door. The cool air of the house hits you. It is a mundane moment, a trivial discomfort. But in the fraction of a second that the cool air touches your wet skin, a signal is sent. The thermal sensors scream, "Drop!" The hypothalamus commands, "Rise!" And the army obeys. In that instant, as you reach for a towel, your skin ripples. The texture changes from smooth to rough. The goosebumps rise. You are reenacting the velvet silence of the Eocene. You are trying to fluff up a coat of fur to trap the heat. Your body is screaming, "We are losing the fire, preserve the core." It is a phantom motion, a futile gesture of biological memory. The towel does the work that the fur once did. But the reflex is a silent testament to the fact that you come from a long line of creatures who could not reach for a towel. You come from creatures who had to be their own towel, their own blanket, their own shelter. Now move through the day. Perhaps you are walking down a busy street. A car brakes suddenly, tires screeching against the asphalt, a harsh dissonant sound. Or perhaps a dog barks aggressively from behind a fence. You startle. Your heart jumps. And before you can rationalize the safety of the sidewalk, a wave of heebie-jeebies washes over your shoulders. The hair on the back of your neck stands up. You are reenacting the illusion of giants. You are trying to bristle. You are trying to look bigger than the threat. Your body is preparing to bluff the saber-tooth, to intimidate the hyena. You are standing your ground in the psychic savannah, armed only with a vestigial reflex. The fear passes. The car moves on. The dog falls silent. The skin relaxes. But for a heartbeat, you were a wild thing again. And then, the evening comes. You are sitting with friends, or perhaps listening to music, or reading a book. A moment of beauty strikes you. A chord resolves perfectly. A line of poetry speaks a truth you have always felt but never named. The chill runs down your spine. It feels like a shimmer of gold dust moving beneath the skin. It is pleasurable, ecstatic, profound. You are reenacting the chill of awe. You are taking the machinery of fear and cold and using it to touch the divine. You are signaling to your tribe and to yourself that this moment matters. You are feeling the music of the code. We are not separate from our history. We are wearing it. Think of the sheer resilience required to get that trait to you. Consider the odds. For the Arrector Pili to be on your arm tonight, an unbroken chain of ancestors had to survive. They had to survive the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, scurrying in the dark with their fur coats fluffed against the nuclear winter. They had to survive the drying of Africa, shedding that fur to run in the sun. They had to survive the crushing ice of the glacial maximums, shivering by weak fires, their skin aching with the effort to stay warm. Every single one of them lived long enough to reproduce. Every single one of them successfully deployed this reflex when it mattered. If just one of them had frozen to death before finding a mate, if just one of them had failed to bluff the predator, the chain would have broken. You would not be here. The skin on your arm would not exist. Your goosebumps are a victory banner. They are a textural memory carved in flesh, reminding you that you are the descendant of the toughest, the luckiest, and the most adaptable creatures to ever walk the earth. There is a deep comfort in this. In the modern world, we often feel disconnected. We feel isolated in our cities, cut off from nature, cut off from the deep rhythm of the seasons. We feel like aliens on our own planet, surrounded by the artificial. But the body brings us back. The body is the anchor. When you look at your goose flesh, you are looking at a map of the environment that shaped you. The bump is the shape of the cold wind. The shiver is the shape of the predator's growl. The chill is the shape of the tribe's song. The world is not outside of you. It is etched into the very mechanism of your being. This legacy on the arm also speaks to our future. If we carry the scars and the tools of the past, what are we building for the descendants who will come after us? Evolution has not stopped. It is a slow, grinding wheel, but it is still turning. Perhaps in 1,000,000 years, the Arrector Pili will finally vanish, erased by the lack of selection pressure. Perhaps they will be repurposed again for some new function we cannot yet imagine. A sensor for digital fields, a communicator of subtle telepathies. Or perhaps they will remain as they are, a stubborn, beautiful glitch, staying with us until the sun expands and swallows the earth. But for now, they are yours. They are your personal ghosts. So, as you lay your head on the pillow, let the darkness of the room become the darkness of the cave. Let the hum of the city outside become the wind on the tundra. Feel the warmth of the blanket not just as a fabric, but as the modern replacement for the fur we lost. You are safe. The fire is lit in the furnace or the radiator. The predators are gone or locked behind doors. The tribe is sleeping in the apartments and houses around you. But if you should wake in the middle of the night, cold and shivering, pulling the duvet up to your chin, pause for a second. Feel the skin on your arms tightening. Do not be annoyed by the cold. Welcome it. Greet the sensation as an old friend. Whisper into the dark. I remember. I remember the Eocene. I remember the forest. I remember the run. I remember the ice. Thank the sleeping army. Thank the tiny microscopic muscles that are trying with all their ancient might to keep you safe. They are the only part of you that still believes you are a wild animal. They are the keepers of the flame. And as you drift off, let the ghost on the arm stand guard. It has watched over your line for 50 million years. It will watch over you tonight. The story of the goosebump is the story of us, a story of loss, of change, of fear, and of the enduring, stubborn, magnificent will to stay warm in a cold universe. Sleep well, naked ape. Your ancestors are with you right there, just beneath the skin.